Greetings. Thank you very much for your participation at the Virtual Leaders Plenary of the Third Summit for Democracy. The Virtual Leaders Plenary is being held under the topic of Democracy for Future Generations, hosted by Korea. The three co-chairs from Korea, Denmark, and Kenya will each chair a session. Let us first start with the opening remarks of the co-chairs.
Honorable global leaders, I welcome all of you to the Third Summit for Democracy. At the previous two summits, we examined our response to global crises that threaten democracy. We affirmed our collective commitment to safeguard it. Today, we have come together again to ponder on democracy for future generations in this ever-changing world. In our time, democracy vastly expanded individual freedom and human rights. It served as a foundation for global peace and prosperity. As leaders, we must take good care of this great legacy called democracy and pass it on to future generations. Indeed, it is our duty to renew their faith in democracy. We have gathered here today because the youth are our future, because they are the strongest driving force of democracy. I look forward to a constructive and fruitful discussion today. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, President Yoon, for hosting this third Summit for Democracy. This year, over 2 billion people will have the opportunity to vote more than ever before. It's a cause for celebration that so many people will have the possibility to exercise one of the most important democratic acts, to go and vote. But democracy is not only the act of voting in itself. It is and it has to be an ongoing conversation. It is in the relation between people that democracy lives. Today, much of this conversation takes place online. On the one hand, this offers huge opportunities. On the other hand, serious risks. This summit shows that we can stand together, that we act on the values that we hold dear. We need to do this, so that democracy always will win. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Yoon Yeol, President of the Republic of Korea. Your Excellency, Mette Frederiksen, Prime Minister of Denmark. Excellencies, heads of state and government, leaders of delegations in attendance, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I commend President Yoon of the Republic of Korea for convening the third summit for democracy under the theme, Democracy for Future Generations. This gathering holds particular significance in light of the burgeoning youth in many global South nations, whose future must be protected and secured by its leadership. This summit, therefore, gives us a platform to not only discuss shared values and core principles of democracy, such as rule of law, good governance, and respect for human rights, but also envision a future with stable governance that spurs economic growth as countries strive to recover from effects of polycrisis, including climate change, energy crisis caused by geopolitics, and sovereign debt crisis caused by COVID-19 pandemic. In the face of global challenges, leaders must establish actionable policies, emphasizing well-coordinated partnerships, a vibrant civil society, and the adoption of sustainable technologies to address threats like unconstitutional changes, terrorism, health crisis, sovereign debt, and climate change. As a leader in the Global South, I acknowledge that the challenges to democracy are an impediment to our desired socio-economic growth. We are, however, optimistic that driven by the ideals of the Africa we want, we shall succeed. I look forward to fruitful engagements and great deliberations.
Next, we will listen to the remarks of congratulations by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I congratulate the Republic of Korea for organizing this summit, which arrives at a critical moment. This year, more than 50 countries, representing half of the world's population, are going to the polls. But around the globe, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law are under assault. Civic space is shrinking. Dissent is being silenced. Human rights defenders and journalists are being persecuted. Mis and disinformation, especially across social media, are driving wedges between people while amplifying lies and racist and xenophobic hatred. Mistrust is growing, fueled by poverty, unemployment, and rising prices. And authoritarianism is on the march, running roughshod over the elements that make democracies work: free speech, peaceful opposition, accountable institutions, civil liberties, impartial and independent justice systems, and respect for the full spectrum of human rights. Excellencies, growing up in my own country, Portugal, the country was ruled by dictatorship. And that dictatorship oppressed not only the people of Portugal, but people under its colonial rule. But I've also lived to see democracy flourish and to see how human rights and democratic values can lift people and societies alike. The flame of democracy burns brightest when these principles are upheld. The flame grows dimmer when they are denied until countries find themselves in darkness. Our responsibility today is to keep the flame of democracy alive by keeping civic and political space open so all people can make their voices heard in democratic processes, including minorities and the most vulnerable in every society. By advancing sustainable development to fulfill social, cultural, and economic rights, by defeating poverty, inequality, hunger, and unemployment, and repairing shredded social safety nets. By investing in education, by achieving full gender equality for women and girls, by fighting against the poisons of racism and bigotry, and by strengthening protections for journalists so they can help ensure transparency and hold leaders to account. The summit's theme, Democracy for Future Generations, reminds us of an additional essential responsibility. We must strengthen democratic systems and institutions for and with the world's 1.8 billion young people and for the generations to follow. September Summit of the Future in New York will be a place for partners to come together for solutions to build trust, strengthen cooperation, and safeguard the interests of future generations. We must work together to combat corruption and strengthen accountability. We must build guardrails for artificial intelligence and the digital world, including through the Global Digital Compact, to protect democracy against technology's perils while realizing its promise. And we must place human rights at the center of democratic institutions and systems. Excellencies, democracy is always a work in progress. Let's keep the flame of democracy alive for present and future generations. Thank you.
Next, we will invite the special remarks by President of the United States.
Hello, everyone. It's great to join you virtually today. President Yoon, thank you for your leadership for hosting the third Summit for Democracy. We're so proud and grateful to hand the reins of the summit over to you. When I became president just over 3 years ago, the defining question of our time was clear. Can the democracies of the world still deliver for our people and stand together to advance progress worldwide? I believed then and I believe now that the answer is yes. Together we've proved it so far. At our first summit, 100 governments made over 750 concrete commitments to advance democracy. At our second summit, we brought more voices to the table, young people, NGOs, and the private sector. Now, for our third summit, we focused on the future. elevating future leaders like young people participating this year, and taking on the issues that will shape the future, like emerging technologies, which can bolster democracy or undermine it. Since our last summit, I brought together America's AI companies, which made voluntary commitments to keep AI systems secure and trustworthy. And I signed an executive order promoting human rights in the design of AI. We've also taken unprecedented action to counter the misuse of commercial spyware. We've imposed sanctions and export controls, including on entities that enable surveillance of Americans, human rights defenders, journalists all around the world. We announced visa restrictions for individuals involved in or financially benefiting from the misuse of this technology. And this week, at this summit, more countries joined the groundbreaking joint statement on commercial spyware. We're expanding a coalition of countries addressing this threat. Looking ahead, my message is simple. Let's keep it up. I asked my entire team to convene a meeting on the margins of this year's United Nations General Assembly to build momentum for the next summit. Let's keep working together to renew our democracies and advance democratic progress worldwide. That includes protecting the free press, fighting corruption, defending free and fair elections, advancing equality, because the strongest democracies are those where everyone contributes and everyone benefits. History has proven again and again, government of the people, by the people, and for the people is still the world's greatest instrument of human progress. So thank you all for protecting that progress and for proving again, democracies do deliver for people, and our citizens can count on us to protect their rights, defend our shared values, and build a democratic future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those inspiring remarks. We will soon begin session 1. Let us now commence Session 1. Session 1 will discuss inclusive society and youth empowerment. This session will be chaired by Prime Minister of Denmark. Let us listen to her opening remarks.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and dear colleagues, I am so glad to chair this session on inclusive society and youth empowerment. The fight for an inclusive society is very dear to my heart, and empowering the young generation to lead this fight is so important. Let me use the opportunity today to share some concrete experiences, ideas, and commitments. We have no greater source of strength than our youth, and no greater asset. We need to do everything we can to empower them and share our own experiences to guide them on their way to build a better future. Allow me to begin by drawing on a few examples from home. The Danish society and democracy stand on the shoulders of social movements, the women's rights movement, the labor movement, and most recently, the climate movement. Movements where people are organized to speak up from the bottom for change, for their rights, and for fairness. I will say that my country would not be as strong as it is today without these powerful movements. And I know the same is true for many other countries. In Zambia, the Youth for Parliament movement mobilized thousands of young people and granted them political power. And in Latin American countries, the Green Wave movement achieved historic progress for women's rights. Young people are, of course, often key in these movements. They have the energy and the new ideas. And it gives me hope when I see young people rising up and taking on the most pressing issues of today. I think we need to support them, invite them to take part in our democracy, give them a seat in our delegations, provide platforms, and of course, listen to them. So they can be at the core of the decisions that will shape the future, because it is their future. Unfortunately, not everything is going in the right direction. Today, we see signs of a democratic backsliding. 2023 marked the 17th year in a row of decline in global freedom. And as we all know, technology is a two-sided coin. It is, of course, a part of the solution, but tech cannot always be trusted. AI can misrepresent reality and give a wrong picture of the world. And technology can be used by anti-democratic forces to censor, to spread fake news, to oppress, and to control people. Russia is one example, and unfortunately, there are many others. That is why Denmark, together with the European Union and Norway, has committed 52 million euros for the Digital Democracy Initiative to equip brave democratic actors, of course, the civil society and grassroots activists with the digital tools that can amplify their voices. And we welcome more countries to join. We have to make tech work for democracy, not against it and not against us. And therefore, I thank the Republic of Korea, President Yoon, and fellow colleagues at this session today for taking action and for actually showing some global leadership. I look forward to hearing your views. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, the Prime Minister of Sweden.
Thank you so much, Excellencies, friends. Let me begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to the Republic of Korea and President Yoon for hosting this third summit for democracy, and to Denmark for hosting this specific session. Democracies need to meet, we need to bond, and we need to rally for democracy. Our world is facing a new and dangerous reality. Authoritarian forces are challenging the rules-based world order, trying to establish the principle of might is right. This brings disastrous consequences. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine continues to cause immense human suffering while destabilizing the European continent and beyond. Democracies are strong, and we know why. Democracies deliver more peace and stronger economies than autocratic countries. As elected governments, we must respond to our citizens' needs or be voted out. Accountability is the simple secret to the power of democracy. The past decades have brought large changes: globalization, digitalization, the climate crisis. Our citizens are right to demand better responses to these changes. Democracies need to continue to deliver for our citizens. The theme of this session, inclusive society and youth empowerment, is highly relevant also for Sweden. From being a country of emigrants during the 19th century, Sweden became a destination for immigrants during the last decade or so. Adapting has not always been easy, and integration is now a very big challenge for Sweden. We are battling social problems such as parallel societies, unemployment, and different kinds of intolerance. Pledges made at previous summits for democracy were developed to deal with some of these challenges. We have tasked government agencies to combat gender and honor-based violence in support of women's and girls' rights. We have strengthened the dialogue with religious communities, and we are introducing education programs to help counter anti-Semitism. Constructing an inclusive society requires shared democratic norms, access to a common language, and a social contract. Renewing our own democratic commitments at home is not enough. There is work to do globally. Responding to global democratic challenges, Sweden has increased its support to human rights and democracy defenders, such as Belarusian democratic forces in exile. We are actively countering the pushback against gender equality, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and the human rights of LGBTIQ people. We are promoting and protecting internet and media freedom and joining efforts related to capacity building to counter cyber threats. We will continue to support Ukraine's fight for freedom and independence for as long as it takes. Protecting democracy at home and abroad is vital to securing independence and freedom, but it cannot be done alone. Building alliances among democracies remain a necessity, and today's cross-regional dialogue is crucial. Let us continue to align our actions to achieve a more secure and democratic world, a shared responsibility based on shared values. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Next, President of Spain.
Thank you, Mette. This year, more than half of the world's population is called to the polls, and millions of young people will have the first real contact with an essential act in every democracy, voting in elections. All my life, I have believed in representative democracy for two reasons. First, because in the history of the world, there is no other political system more respectful of the dignity of the human being. Second, because the evidence shows that democracy and prosperity go hand in hand. But the truth is that today many people do not share this vision, and as a consequence, democracy is under threat in many places. Reversing this trend requires taking action, and above all, get young people hooked on democracy. To make it possible, first of all, we must address the real problems without paternalism, understanding their perspectives and fears, praising their fight for diversity. We must encourage well-informed debates, respect for diverse opinions, and inclusive decision-making among young people. Secondly, we must empower new generations, and there is no more powerful tool for that than a good educational system. A system that goes ahead and not behind of a constantly changing labor market. A system that provides them with tools against misinformation and reinforce their rights in the era of digitalization. This generation will face the challenges that artificial intelligence represents. Let's give them the tools to turn into an opportunity to live better. Finally, we must tackle inequality and strengthen social cohesion. The youth of this generation have faced several crises in their lives. We must work for intergenerational justice to break the myth that they will be the first generation to live worse than their parents. Extremism and authoritarian regimes feed on discontent. We must fight for equal opportunities and make the social elevator working again for young people. Because if we fail, the adults of tomorrow will stop believing that democracy is the most effective political system to guarantee peace and progress for all. Spain is fully committed with this agenda. We have been working through our democracy program to promote democracy between Spain, Europe, and Latin America and the Caribbean. We continue to develop the Ellas Plus Fund to promote the full and effective participation of women and equal leadership opportunities in political life. We joined the Blue Point Network last year to make our infrastructure more sustainable, transparent, and inclusive. And we have committed to transparency with new accountability mechanism. Dear friends, Spain is one of the 24 full democracies in the world, but we are not an old democracy. We have a recent memory of tyranny. That closeness helps us in what I understand it to be a fundamental duty for all democracies, teaching the youngest that freedom and progress cannot be taken for granted. That democracy is a fragile treasure that cannot be taken for granted. Let's give to the young the tools they need to protect and believe in democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, President of Paraguay.
Thank you. Distinguished Prime Minister of Denmark, Her Excellency Mette Frederiksen, distinguished Head of State and Head of Government, I'm pleased to extend a cordial greeting to you, the panelists and participants of this first session of the Summit for Democracy. Paraguay is an eminently young nation. In a country, people aged 35 represent more than 70% of the population. Therefore, this segment of the summit is particularly relevant to us. If I have to describe the Paraguayan youth, I will do so by highlighting their high aspirations for self-improvement and constant and continuous search for growth. These characteristics and expectations have a significant influence on the development of public policy of the National Youth Secretariat in Paraguay. This institution has been promoting initiatives in multiple areas, such as the promotion of entrepreneurship, the advancement of digital inclusion to reduce the technological gap, and the support of access to university education through more than 5,000 study scholarships to outstanding young people throughout the country. Also, the National Youth Secretariat has been encouraging youth leadership through participation in political and community life, as well as the search for specific solutions for young people in different regions of our national territory. However, beyond these initiatives and actions to comprehensively address the needs of young people, our government is focused on strengthening institutions as a whole, optimizing the use of public resources and improving essential policies of the state, such as security, justice, education, health, and social protection. Given the large youth segments in the Paraguayan population, each of our shortcomings in government management will primarily affect them. Therefore, this overall approach to addressing challenges is essential for us. Ladies and gentlemen, young people have a need that we must address as a priority. Access to employment. Only through decent employment and productive work, we can effectively address other social needs. The lack of job opportunities aggravates each of the problems our societies face. Therefore, this is one of the central concerns that I have committed to addressing during my administration. Our government is dedicated to responding to the working demand of the Paraguayan young people through close coordination with the private sector, in addition to actively promoting and facilitating timely training and education for them. However, job creation in a globalized world also requires the commitment of the international community to establish conditions that facilitate the benefiting from trade and investment opportunities, as well as the boosting of economic growth. For this reason, Paraguay is committed to promoting the elimination of obstacles, both nationally and internationally, that hinder the generation of wealth and the creation of value chains and decent work. A truly effective approach to youth social inclusion must inevitably consider the economic conditions for prosperity. That is a global regulatory environment that stimulates socioeconomic progress and allows young people access to opportunities in all areas. Excellencies, improving the quality of life of young people and offering them meaningful opportunities is our priority duty, not only as an act of justice, but also as a measure to safeguard the stability and strength of our democracies. Distinguished leaders, it is our responsibility to inspire the young generation to continue supporting democratic values. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, the President of Malawi.
Your Excellency, Ms. Mette Frederiksen, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Denmark, and chairperson of this session. Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In our design of functional democracies for future generations, we have to take into serious consideration the question of how we build inclusive societies in which young people feel empowered. For us in Africa, this is quite an urgent matter. Our population is just under 1.5 billion, yet close to 1/3 are children aged 10 and under. Over 40% are children under the age of 18, and over half are young people under the age of 25. It is indisputable that Africa is the youngest continent in the world, and that means that Africa is the central bank of the world's future generation. As such, it is not enough for us to state social inclusivity and youth empowerment as a goal under the 2030 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, UN SDGs. We must align our national programs and international policies to that goal and back them up with requisite resources. As I travel across Malawi and interact with young people, their vision of a democracy for their generations and their children is very clear. They desire a democracy that creates economic opportunities through entrepreneurship ventures that have access to the global market and through dignified employment. They desire a democracy that treats the loosening of rights and the loosening of markets as two sides of the same coin that cannot be divorced. This is where as leaders, we must show up for the young people of the world. We must understand that the digital age now gives a young person in Karonga, Malawi, access to information and events in Comrade, Moldova. That is what tech companies and online digital platforms have achieved. For that reason, as far as they are concerned, it is a failure of democratic government that in this digitized global village, the same young people in Karonga and Comrade do not have access to the markets in each other's countries and face enormous roadblocks just to travel between those markets. We cannot claim that we are creating democracies for future generations if we are not increasing the freedom of young people to move around the global economy. The democracy of the future is not just about access to rights, but also access to resources for building a free life. This is why the African Continental Free Trade Area and its operationalization is the greatest investment that any of Africa's development partners can make in the future of Africa's democracy. We must recognize that the yoke of economic inequality that many young people feel around their necks is the obstacle we must overcome before young people can feel that the societies they live in are truly free. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next, the Prime Minister of Iraq.
And appreciation to the organizers of the summit. I am very delighted to communicate with you through this event that is important for all the peoples of the earth, where we hope that our efforts will be united and concerted to achieve our basic goals of advancement and progress towards a world in which all peoples enjoy prosperity and development. Our people have gone through many experiences and pivotal moments that left a clear impact on their course. Among them, of course, our people in Iraq who had special experiences with difficult transformation, during which many opportunities of growth and development were lost, especially during the time of the dictatorial regime that plunged Iraq into senseless wars that negatively affected the youth. With the liberation of Iraq and its return to the ranks of the world after a long isolation, we found ourselves as governments face an important fact, which is that Iraqi society is a young society with a percentage of youth reaching 60%. It represents a great wealth. This requires commitments that accommodate the youthful capabilities that must be successfully employed. Therefore, our government, since the beginning of its work, has developed plans and programs to accommodate young people and benefit from their energy in building Iraq, which emerged from a few years ago from the most brutal existential war after the terrorist ISIS gangs took control of large swathe of our country. Our government's program includes a lot of pillars targeting the youth. For example, last year, for the first time in the history of Iraq, we formed the Supreme Youth Council, which is responsible for drawing up plans, programs, and employing youth energies in our country. I made sure that this council is headed by the Prime Minister and that its executive structure includes ministers, heads of commissions, and advisors. This council has taken many important decisions and initiatives that push towards providing real opportunities for young people. In the field of scientific activity for young people, we have launched an initiative to send abroad 5,000 students, males and females, to study various specializations in the best universities in the world to acquire modern sciences and learn about the most important developments in their respective scientific fields. The first group of those students, which included 400 male and female students from various regions of Iraq, has left the country last month. In addition, we have activated the National Strategy for Education, which continues until the year 2031, in order to provide appropriate educational environments that embrace our youth. It's a comprehensive strategy and works to modernize the pillars of education process. As for the work environment, our government has formulated many reforms aimed at developing the private sector and lifting restriction on its work in order to provide job opportunities for many young graduates. Our idea is to revive the private sector and provide it with facilities, which is something that has resulted today in providing many job opportunities of young people. In parallel, we have launched a group of job initiatives for youth, such as the Riada Entrepreneurship Initiative and the initiatives of the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, all of which are initiatives that are based on the idea of innovation and employing youth energies and skills. Ladies and gentlemen, the social and economic and political transformations that the world is witnessing have imposed on us special patterns of living and tastes, and have posed social threats, perhaps the most dangerous of which is the scourge of narcotics and psychotropic substances that killed millions of people around the world. Therefore, and based on this point, we call for the formation of a global coalition to fight these narcotics and toxins that are devastating the societies, especially young people. In conclusion, we must remember the tragedy of the Palestinian people in Gaza and the systemic killing, aggression, and genocide that the young people face, which requires a serious, responsible moral stance for the international community. I renew my thanks and appreciation to everyone, especially President of Republic of Korea, Mr. Yoon, for hosting this summit, and I thank you for listening. May God, peace, mercy, blessing be upon you.
Thank you. Next, the President of Latvia.
Thank you, Prime Minister Frederiksen, for leading this session. Dear friends, we must make our societies resilient to protect democracy. We need to address disinformation and the use of artificial intelligence, which evolves by the day. Artificial intelligence can be a blessing and a curse. Voice generation and other technologies can be used by malicious actors to conduct information manipulation, also including foreign actors. Governments and tech companies need to work together on solutions to mitigate potential risks, especially during election year. Let's face, young people are very skilled in technologies, but they also must be skilled in democracy and media literacy. Defending democracy, protecting our freedoms requires a whole of society approach. It also means to give a voice and the right tools to participate in public decisions. Latvia stands for strengthening the civic participation for gender equality and empowering the youth to be a part of democratic processes. As leaders, we also need to do our part to protect democracies around the globe for our future generations, to explain to the youth the worth of democracy. We also must help those who are fighting to protect democracy and the rules-based international order. Dear friends of democracy, Latvia is committed to strengthening democratic values, human rights, and the rule of law, both at home and globally. Latvia knows the value of democracy through a bitter fight for freedom and independence. And we also believe that democracy is the foundation of freedom and peace. But we also must remind ourselves that democracy is not being taken for granted, and it is our duty to protect it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Prime Minister of Nepal.
Honorable Chair of the session, Excellencies, I am pleased to address the third Summit for Democracy under the overarching theme of Democracy for Future Generations, highlighting inclusive society and youth empowerment for the second time. I thank the President of the Republic of Korea for hosting this summit. Nepal is a multilingual, multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multi-religious society. Democratic values are deeply rooted in our culture and social values. Our people's faith in democracy has always remained undaunted, which is demonstrated through a series of political struggles. We are fully committed to democracy, which is firmly embedded in the Constitution of Nepal. It guarantees people's sovereignty, fundamental human rights, social justice, inclusion, separation of powers, periodic election, and independent judiciary and equality. Freedom of the press and the publication are ensured by the Constitution. We have a vibrant society that is continuously watching over the government's action. Nepal believes in unity in diversity, which are native to our country and civilization. In our view, sustained democracy is closely linked with enduring peace, good governance, and inclusive development. We highly value freedom, equality, diversity, civil liberties, and the rule of law. Free, fair, and frequent elections are the soul of democracy. Nepal successfully held periodic elections at all levels of the government and fulfilled the electoral post by democratic election. Recently, we fulfilled 1/3 of new lawmakers, including the chair and vice chair in the upper house. Excellencies, human rights are important pillars of democracy. Nepal is fully committed to human rights and believes in universality, interdependence, and mutually reinforcing nature of human rights, including the right to development. Nepal is fully committed to zero tolerance against corruption. Our legislative and institutional frameworks are being aligned with the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Recently, the Parliament passed a bill related to amending the Money Laundering Prevention Act. Nepal's constitution has guaranteed the rights of women. The constitution ensured at least 33% of women at federal parliament and provincial assemblies and 40% at the local levels. Nepal's homegrown peace process is a well-known example for the world. The conclusion of peace process is in the offing with an amendment bill being tabled at the parliament in consultation with the concerned stakeholder. Nepal has been advocating for climate justice in multiple forums, including in the COP process. We are committed to reaching net zero emissions by 2045 and look forward for continued support from our development partners in future, further consolidating our democracy and realizing development aspirations. I thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, President of Moldova.
Distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be joining you today at the third Summit for Democracy. With the world facing geopolitical crisis and economic pressures, the need for us to discuss ways of protecting democratic progress is greater than ever. We know from experience that inclusive societies are more united, and when democracy is threatened, they rise to the occasion. Moldova exemplifies this resilience. During these demanding times, with Russia's war against Ukraine on our doorstep, Moldova has continued to demonstrate strong commitment to inclusion. We have opened our hearts and homes to hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian refugees, which at the peak made up 4% of our population. We offer them shelter, support, and a sense of community, but also access to schooling, healthcare, and jobs. Gender equality is another important area of our focus. I'm proud to state that Moldova has achieved 19th place out of 146 countries in the Global Gender Gap Report 2023, published by the World Economic Forum. We have ratified and are implementing the Istanbul Convention to combat violence against women and promote gender equality more effectively. Moldova's parliament has 41 women out of 101 MPs, which is a record in the country's history. In our recent local elections last November, 42% of women were elected councillors of cities, towns, and villages. A quarter of mayors across the country are women. When it comes to young people, we often express the sentiment that the youth are the architects of tomorrow's world. However, I firmly believe that they are already shaping today's world. Our political landscape, for instance, is getting younger. Moldova's youngest MP is just 24 years old, and the youngest minister is 32. 10% of Moldova's MPs are younger than 30 years old. We have the commitment to empower the younger generation and to encourage their engagement in democratic processes. Moldova has taken significant steps by establishing the National Youth Agency and National Network of Local Youth Councils. Through these councils, young Moldovans actively contribute to the formulation of policies and the allocation of the annual youth budget, ensuring their perspectives and needs are addressed. We also have an annual grant program that plays a crucial role in nurturing the youth sector, benefiting approximately 30 organizations each year. This initiative provides essential financial and logistical support, enabling the successful implementation of youth-led initiatives and projects. Ladies and gentlemen, we recognize that there are external forces that seek to exploit ethnic, linguistic, and other differences to undermine our unity. However, we remain steadfast in our commitment to building an inclusive and united society where everyone has a stake and contributes to the prosperity we create together. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleagues, for your powerful.
Thank you for your
and
remarks. Next, we will go to the Prime Minister of Denmark for her closing remarks.
Thank you, dear colleagues, for your powerful and inspiring contributions to this important discussion. And thank you once again, President Yoon and the Republic of Korea for hosting and organizing the third Summit for Democracy. Although we come from different parts of the world, I can hear that we all share the same vision: to build a more peaceful, a more democratic and inclusive future. And of course, the young generation is right at the center of this vision. I really noticed what the president of Malawi said when he reminded us that Africa is the central bank of youth. With the rise of disinformation, fake news, and challenges caused by AI, we have to find new ways in our fight for democracy. And we can only do this together in this alliance. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you very much to all of the leaders for your participation in Session 1. This brings us to the end of Session 1. After a short break, we will listen to interventions by partner institutions, and that will be the start of Session 2.
We will now proceed with the interventions from the representatives of the PEC that led the civil society events held yesterday.
Dear President Yoon, distinguished guests, friends all, thank you very much for the opportunity to support Korea in convening this third summit for democracy and to share a few words about fostering strong, robust democracies in a year when more than 2 billion voters across over 50 countries will head to the polls, including, of course, in Korea. Governments around the world have taken measures to strengthen democratic institutions, support a free and independent press, and protect civic and human rights in an effort to foster trust and strengthen democratic resilience. To build on these efforts, a strengthened international cooperation is key to ensure a stronger, freer, and democratic future that delivers on citizens' expectations. The OECD's Reinforcing Democracy initiative aims to do just that by supporting dialogue, sharing best practices, and by developing evidence-based policy recommendations across 5 key pillars. First, strengthening information integrity through enhanced transparency, accountability, and plurality of information sources. Korea's National Election Commission has been vigilant in identifying risks from deepfake AI-generated content ahead of upcoming parliamentary elections in April. The OECD's Dis and Misinformation Resource Hub provides a repository of public policy tools to protect information integrity and promotes available evidence on their effectiveness. Second, improving citizen participation and representation in public life. This includes better informing, consulting, and engaging citizens in decision-making. Third, strengthening government's capacity to address risks from foreign influence, for example, through effective lobbying safeguards and by harnessing the potential of digital technologies. Fourth, ensuring a fair and inclusive transition to net zero. And fifth, transforming public governance for digital democracy, including by enhancing government transparency and data access. We look forward to continue to work with you across all of these priorities. I wish you a positive and productive summit as you build links between government, media, civil society, academia, and the private sector to ensure our democracies remain vibrant, resilient, and strong, and continue to deliver for the people they serve. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, in that first Summit for Democracy in December 2021, President Biden called for champions of democracy, and the Republic of Korea clearly answered that call with this summit, proving their commitment to fostering democracy internationally. In this effort, they've been joined by many member states of the community of democracies, those that are active in the democracy cohorts which arose from the first summit. The community of democracies has partnered on this important initiative by promoting a platform for youth engagement. Our action has provided young individuals from around the world with the opportunity to present their viewpoints and to engage in meaningful discourse with participating states. Last year at the Summit for Democracy 2, co-hosted by Costa Rica, our community of democracy youth leads presented practical and effective strategies for strengthening youth participation in the democratic process. It was also during that assembly in San Jose that the idea for a global youth democracy network was first announced. It's an idea which we are now implementing. In this year, community of democracy efforts have further evolved into a partnership as we work with other democracy organizations and with the Republic of Korea as part of the Platform for Engagement with Civil Society. This successful collaboration with International IDEA, OGP, and the OECD will certainly contribute to forwarding democracy. So as we look beyond this third summit, allow me to look back to 24 years ago when Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and Poland's Foreign Minister Bronislaw Goremek brought together more than 100 countries, new and old democracies, in the founding of the community of democracies. Madeleine Albright said at that time, the principle of democratic solidarity is powerful as free countries come together to help each other with common challenges. I want to commend the Republic of Korea, a governing council member of the community of democracies, for keeping alive this important initiative and for its commitment to that principle of solidarity in its achievement of this third Summit for Democracy.
Your Excellencies, at a time when democracies are confronting existential threats from plummeting citizen trust in government and the rise of authoritarianism, the Summit for Democracy has injected vital political energy into the democratic movement. But the real credibility and momentum of this movement will come from the implementation and scaling up of concrete reforms that actually renew democracy for citizens. Therefore, our central priority in S4D must be to move from promises to action, ensuring that commitments made at this S4D translate into concrete actions so that by the time we meet next, our fellow citizens can see the impact of these promises. In our open government partnership, 75 member governments and thousands of civil society organizations have implemented over 5,000 reforms over the last decade. And we find that open government reforms advancing transparency and accountability can tangibly renew democracy for citizens, for instance, by exposing the real owners of shell companies that prop up autocrats, or by opening up opaque procurement contracts that steal precious resources from the public. And we have compelling evidence over the last decade that if governments partner with civil society, the reforms are more ambitious and the results stronger. Our partnership has been a strong supporter of S4D from the first summit, a co-leader of the Financial Transparency and Integrity cohort, and a part of the platform for the engagement with civil society. We will continue to enthusiastically join forces with all partners to advance the vital S4D goals. Thank you to the Republic of Korea for hosting this summit. It is vital that we sustain this momentum through political leadership and advancement of concrete reforms from all of you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kevin Casas-Zamora, the Secretary General of International IDEA. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you at this third Summit for Democracy. As an intergovernmental organization with 35 member states from all regions and a mandate to support democracy globally, International IDEA has been closely involved in the Summit for Democracy since it began. We have co-led the cohorts on gender equality and youth engagement. We have supported preparations by the summit host, both in the United States and the Republic of Korea. And we are one of the coordinators of the Global Democracy Coalition, which now includes over 120 organizations and has become a valuable complement to the state-led summit. Let me say very clearly that I hope the Summit for Democracy process will live on for many years. The case for it is compelling. First, the summit is a powerful way to convey the message that democracies can collaborate with each other, at least as much as authoritarian regimes seem to do it these days. Second, the summit gives all of us engaged in the struggle to protect and advance democracy a sense of community. This is the venue where democratic governments and leaders, civil society activists, academics and business actors can come together to show that they are willing to stand up for democracy. Third, through the workings of the cohorts, the summit can generate and has generated concrete initiatives to strengthen democracy endowed with international support. Fourth, the summit can be a wonderful platform to engage in mutual learning about what works to support democracy. This combination of roles is not fulfilled by any other organization or gathering in the world. Hence, we should try as hard as we can to preserve this great venue. Of course, all of this assumes that we strive to create a summit process that is truly inclusive, that is a celebration of diversity, a process that is noisy, vibrant, even a little chaotic like democracy itself. In a way, what is needed is a cup for democracy, just as we have one for climate change and other global issues. The democratic cause needs all of us. Thank you again for your support of this summit and the broader effort to support democracy globally.
Thank you very much for your interventions. We will now begin session 2, which will focus on the theme of technology, elections, and misinformation and disinformation. First, we will have an opening remarks from President Yoon of Korea, who's chairing the session. Dear Excellencies and global citizens who support democracy, I would like to welcome you to session 2 under the theme of technology, elections, and misinformation and disinformation. Today, the world is facing an unprecedented public crisis. Even before the wounds of the COVID-19 pandemic have healed, geopolitical conflicts are raging in various parts of the world, and the climate crisis is deepening the food and energy crisis globally. In addition, the rise of authoritarianism in many parts of the world is challenging the democracy that we have all defended. Dear Excellencies, in 1965, Intel co-founder Gordon Moore made the intriguing claim that the performance of semiconductors doubles every 2 years. As predicted by Moore's law, the world is developing at a rapid pace that the humanity has never experienced before. New products and services using artificial intelligence and big data keep emerging in our markets. And so now our lives are becoming more convenient. But on the other hand, we are also experiencing unexpected side effects. In particular, the indiscriminate spread of fake news and manipulated information using AI and internet bot technology is emerging as a global problem. Fake news and disinformation, which is systematically produced and distributed by certain forces, goes beyond simply spreading misinformation, but it also causes social conflicts and division. Also, fake news threatens elections, which are the foundation of democracy, by inciting people to make wrong decisions based on information that is not true. This is a clear provocation and challenge against democracy. This year is a super election year where more than a third of the global population will cast their votes. Dear Excellencies, democracies that share common values must be united, and we need to respond to fake news and disinformation together. Our responsibility to safeguard the foundations of democracy through fair elections is greater than ever. We need to work together to establish laws and regulations to deal with disinformation and misinformation strictly. In particular, international cooperation is needed to strictly enforce relevant laws to keep foreign forces from influencing the election processes of other countries. We also need solidarity and sharing of technology to defend our democracy. We need to build AI and digital systems that can detect and combat those who use AI and digital technologies to create fake news and spread disinformation. If malicious disinformation and fake news still do not stop, then we need to carry out strong and systematic anti-propaganda campaigns together. Excellencies, the promotion of democracy in the world can never be achieved by the power of any single nation. We need to continue to strengthen and expand solidarity among democracies that share universal values. To this end, the Republic of Korea will closely work together with governments, international organizations, and private sector partners. In particular, we will continue to build on the achievements of the 3 summits for democracy, and we will join forces with our partners in the international community to firmly defend our democracy from misinformation and disinformation. With that, I would now like to invite the participating leaders to deliver their remarks on the topic of Session 2. I thank you all for your valuable contribution. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, we will hear from the Prime Minister of Japan.
I would like to pay tribute to the government of the Republic of Korea for hosting the 3rd Summit for Democracy and to President Yoon for chairing this leaders' plenary. Democratic institutions and forms of democracy vary from country to country and time to time, and we are still searching for how democracy should be. Democracy should be diverse. However, we must not lose sight of its essence. It should be equipped with legal mechanisms that respect the will of the majority and at the same time defend the fundamental rights and freedoms of individuals and minorities. Equality before the law to guarantee those rights and freedoms and free and fair elections are also crucial aspects. Japan reiterates the importance of democratic principles and the underlying spirit of tolerance, cooperation, and compromise. Furthermore, we also need to address challenges to these principles in the online information space that new technologies opened up to us. The development of the internet and social media platforms has given human beings access to a wide variety of information and avenues for expression. Information that was once limited in access is now instantly available from a smartphone in your hand. On the other hand, such developments have also made it easy to express and disseminate slanders and insults to others, and discriminatory speech and behavior directed at people of a certain ethnic or national origin are broadly referred to as hate speech. This could result in exchanges of accusations and silencing of people's voice, creating divisions in society and preventing healthy debate and discussion, which is essential for democracy. We need a stronger response. As free and fair elections are the foundation of democracy, it is essential that voters are able to make decisions of their own free will based on necessary and sufficient information in an environment where the freedom of expression is guaranteed.
However, there is a risk of AI-generated deepfakes and spoofed audio, making it difficult to distinguish between true and false information and hindering people's political self-determination, and thereby destabilizing and disrupting society. To address these risks, Japan is also advancing discussions on technologies against disinformation and misinformation by AI at the AI Strategy Council. In addition, we are also looking into comprehensive measures in areas such as addressing how digital platform operators should respond to the challenges and how to improve digital media literacy among the general public. The spread of disinformation is a challenge common to all countries and requires common understanding and collaboration at the international level. Japan launched the Hiroshima AI process last year as the G7 presidency and led the discussion on generative AI. The process successfully formulated the international guiding principles and code of conduct. Going forward, this initiative could be expanded beyond the G7. Last October, in order to share knowledge on measures against disinformation in the region, Japan also hosted the Internet Governance Forum for the first time. In this forum, measures against disinformation and misinformation were discussed, and the existing practices against disinformation document was published with good practices of countermeasures against disinformation taken in various countries. We will continue to work with the international community to defend universal values, including democracy, while enjoying the benefits of technology. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And now the Prime Minister of Canada.
Thank you very much. I want to start by thanking President Yoon of the Republic of Korea for hosting this third Summit for Democracy. It's an important time. Thank you for leading on this, my friend. I also want to thank Prime Minister Kishida for his words, and it's great to see so many other friends committed to democracy at this session right now. It's good to see you all this morning. On est ici aujourd'hui afin de réaffirmer notre volonté de bâtir des démocraties solides et des institutions résilientes. This conversation is especially important right now because, as Yeol pointed out, 2024 will be the biggest election year in history, with countries representing more than half the world's population going to the polls. Unfortunately, many of these elections are unlikely to meet the criteria of what academic experts would view as free and fair. In Russia, the recent presidential election was stacked in favor of the current leader. But for those of us who do run free and fair elections, we have to continue our work to improve our democracies. For example, earlier today, discussions around the importance of inclusion and youth empowerment will hopefully lead to more young people participating in their communities and countries. We're all facing a series of challenges, new and old. We're still reeling from a pandemic that put immense pressure on our democracies. We're seeing growing distrust of government and media, and increased polarization exacerbated by misinformation and disinformation. We're dealing with insecurity caused by armed conflicts and climate change. So today, I'm announcing that Canada is investing $8.4 million on research across the global south to better understand how climate change interacts with democratic decline. These initiatives will also help protect the human rights of environmental defenders. On top of the uncertainty caused by different crises, we're also seeing direct threats to individuals globally through transnational repression. This is why Canada is increasing and expanding its funding for Access Now to ensure human rights defenders and others facing digital threats have the resources they need to protect themselves. En cette époque déterminante, on doit redoubler d'efforts pour affronter les menaces contre la démocratie, incluant la mésinformation et la désinformation. On information integrity, governments can lead the way and be more proactive in strengthening citizen resilience. The Global Declaration on Information Integrity Online is a Canadian contribution to protecting and promoting a healthy information ecosystem. It is a concrete step towards the development of international norms as it lays out high-level commitments for governments. The declaration also invites industry to enhance transparency in advertising, algorithm, and content moderation processes. Disinformation is often used by foreign actors who want to interfere in the domestic affairs of other states. To identify and respond to foreign threats to democracies, Canada leads the G7 Rapid Response Mechanism, which we created back in 2018 when we hosted the G7 that year. In the context of Russia's war in Ukraine, the mechanism has enabled rapid information sharing and collaboration to address Russian disinformation, which includes state-sponsored disinformation around Ukrainian children abductions and the proliferation of automated networks that amplify pro-Russian narratives. Disinformation and threats to information integrity are not new. But with new technology like generative AI, we're concerned about the spread of disinformation at an unprecedented scale. More guardrails will be needed, and they'll need to be transparent and themselves grounded in democratic values and norms. Pour ce qui est de l'intelligence artificielle, il nous faudra davantage de mesures de protection, des mesures qui devront être transparentes et fondées sur des valeurs et des normes démocratiques. My friends, in democracies, we know there's always more work to be done. Democracy didn't happen by accident, and it won't continue without effort. So once again, I want to thank my friend, President Yoon, for all his hard work in promoting strong and healthy democracies, not just with this summit, but with his ongoing work around the world. Merci, mes amis. Kamsa hamnida.
Thank you very much. Up next is the President of Bulgaria.
Your Excellency, President Yoon Yeol, dear colleagues. First, let me express my gratitude to the Republic of Korea for organizing this timely forum. I truly appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it. There is no doubt that the development of modern information and communication technologies expands our economic potential, but also carries certain threats to democracies. Threats that we, the democratic leaders, are bound to consider and prevent. In the context of the current multiple geopolitical challenges and the general destabilization of the international legal order, social media can easily turn into a weapon of war by allowing malicious parties to interfere in the political dynamics of targeted democratic countries. Like many other countries, Bulgaria is also exposed to such threats. Despite the fact that we have a well-developed IT business sector, our public fora are still vulnerable to the spread of disinformation and fake news. This poses a risk to the integrity of the national democratic process. The reasons behind are complex, but I believe that in order to make our society more resilient to disinformation, we need to enhance public trust in democratic institutions, to increase digital literacy, and to secure social inclusion for vulnerable social groups. With these goals in mind, we have already supported a number of important initiatives. Within the framework of the European Union, we welcome the adoption of the European Democracy Action Plan and of the European Media Freedom Act. This new legislation will provide strong safeguards to media freedom and the right of information in the EU member states by protecting editorial independence, the independent functioning of the public service media, and strengthening the transparency of media ownership. Bringing the relevant national regulations and practices in line with the European Media Freedom Act should be a high priority for us in the next months. Domestically, Bulgaria has also taken some important steps to secure media freedom, namely by certain legislative amendments, reducing any undue pressure on journalists. We have still a long way to go before ensuring sustainable media freedom. However, I think that a step in the right direction has been made. Technologies, however, can also serve as a tool of strengthened democracy, especially when used to facilitate the electoral process. Traditionally, in Bulgarian elections, there has been a significant share of invalid ballots. In the 2014 parliamentary elections, 6% of the casted votes were invalid. And this share grew to 15% in the local elections 5 years later. Since 2019, the parliament introduced machine voting as an alternative in the polling stations above 300 voters. 2 years later, machine voting became the sole form of voting in those stations. In this way, the share of invalid ballots dropped to less than 1%, and the election results became more accurate. In 2022, the Bulgarian parliament voted another significant amendment to the legislative rules and procedures by allowing video recording and online video streaming to the ballots count after closing the polling stations. Hence, the transparency of the vote counting process had been enhanced. We anticipate that this still and will generally lead to an increase of public trust in the election results and reduce the likelihood of electoral law violations. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize that strengthening our democracy does not require only legislative measures. It should also rely on comprehensive strategy to overcome poverty and social exclusion, which includes raising the educational level of vulnerable social groups and improving the quality of accessible education. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, President. Up next is the President of Botswana.
Your Excellency, President Yoon Yeol of South Korea, fellow panelists, heads of delegation, a very good evening. Let me begin by first congratulating President Yoon Yeol of South Korea for hosting this third summit, Democracy Summit of Democracy Summit of the leaders in South Korea. I'd like to begin by stating that I, speaking from Botswana, a country that is the oldest and longest running democracy, multi-party democracy in Africa, represent but a voice of many democracies throughout Africa. And we acknowledge readily, as others have, that this year, 2024, presents an opportunity wherein 4.2 billion of the world's population will be subjected to an electoral process that is democratic and will yield leaders of various shapes and forms. But coming to the subject of the topic, technology, elections, and disinformation, it's important to point out earlier on that we are presented with mixed opportunities and mixed challenges because of where we are in our digital transformation processes. First is the very fact that we have advanced in our digital technology developments across the globe presents opportunity for very many more people to participate, very many more people to be reached, and very many more people to be exposed to the risks of disinformation or misinformation. And therefore, the burden of responsibility placed on all of us, as is required of any credible leader, is to build trust in the systems that we adopt, is to embellish credibility and integrity in the systems that we develop and use. And the authenticity of such trust and credibility yields stability and confidence in the system. If these are broadened by the application of communication technology, if these are allowed to prevail by the ease of access to such technology, which speaks to the rights of the voter, it enhances, it deepens our democratic dispensation. Anything that might undermine such trust is a direct assault on the potential for democracy to yield the very stability, the trust that we all yearn for. And so my plea for this conference to consider and deliberate upon is that we, particularly in the Global South, we, the young democracies, we, the underdeveloped in terms of our technology systems, do receive some empathetic assistance, support, protection, and help to make sure that we can ring-fence the integrity of our democratic systems, particularly to stabilize our countries. For if we do not, we risk the very values that bring us together. And so I welcome this summit, which should turn into a coalition of like-minded and hopefully will provide an opportunity for a resetting of affirmation of the values that we all subscribe to. And by that, it would require that we invest in every form in ensuring that our digital systems, our digital platforms reach as many, are applied by as many, and are stabilized for the sake of stabilizing democratic dispensation. Democracy is fragile, and technology should never be used as a tool to threaten democracy. It requires all of us to empower our citizens, to ensure that we regulate these systems, we capacitate our institutions and systems, we innovate continuously, we sophisticate, we make sure our people participate, and we share in building this unbreakable coalition of a commitment to the values of the like-minded in defense and protection of democracy. In Botswana, I'm pleased to inform you that as we gravitate to the 2024 elections in October of this year, we are rock solid in our commitment to making sure that our democracy is defended. I thank you. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Now we have the President of Lithuania.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the third summit for democracy comes at the time of war in Europe, as well as of intensifying disruptions globally. For the third year already, Russia is waging a brutal war against Ukraine. This international crime of aggression has caused a humanitarian, environmental, and moral disaster. It also represents a major threat to global security. Yet nowadays, no war is confined to the battlefield. We see that in Ukraine, where technology blurs the lines between the physical and the virtual. Aggression has also easily spread across borders via modern communication channels, making every supporter of Ukraine a target. Russia's main goal to weaken the foundations of democracy globally has not changed for at least 2 decades. And Russia is not alone. There are other international actors with the same aim. Right now, we see a clear line separating the free world from those wishing to destroy it. Not only physical threats, but also the stream of propaganda and misinformation is constantly seeking to get inside. In recent decades, virtually every democratic society has become a target of hybrid warfare. Malicious cyber activities, disruptive technologies, and troll factories on social media help to create parallel realms of distorted reality. These efforts notably intensify whenever democratic elections are approaching. Our ability to engage in free and fair elections has always been our great strength. Nonetheless, there is also an inherent fragility in every single democratic system. Everything relies on citizens and their confidence in democratic institutions. To erode this confidence is to undermine democracy. Or so many autocrats think, rushing to exploit our vulnerabilities. This year, almost half of the global population will cast their votes in elections. Lithuania is one of them. Not only our national, but also European elections are at stake. Our institutions are already monitoring foreign hostile activities. To withstand the pressure, we will once again rely both on society's resilience and united institutional efforts. On a global level, a resolute response is also needed. Democracies must work together to expose, counter, and ultimately defeat efforts to undermine the foundations of our free and open societies. Be it Russia or any other actor, we cannot allow them to manipulate or eventually capture our institutions. We must strengthen our cybersecurity defenses and invest in technological solutions for countering disinformation. Ultimately, the strength of democracy lies in the resilience of our people. Thus, we should consolidate our human and technical resources to effectively counter hostile threats. Democracy, free and fair elections, and trust in governance should be defended at all costs. This, I believe, is our shared goal and our duty. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the President of Estonia.
Your Excellency, President Yoon, thank you very much for hosting this summit. Distinguished audience, in a world marked by discord, rapid change and conflicts, democracy stands as a beacon of hope for humanity. As democracy, with its foundation in the power of the people, remains a fundamental expression of human rights and dignity, offering a path towards peace, progress, and prosperity. We have argued that at the end of history, democracy is inevitable, but we are not yet there. A war in Europe has showed us that there are aggressive anti-democratic forces at work whose aim is to destroy our values, our way of life, and collapse the world into spheres of influence. We see authoritarian regimes tightening their grip on power, suppressing, even killing dissents, and trampling on the rights of the citizens. A range of anti-democratic narratives from chauvinism to the far right amplify each other with the backing of authoritarian governments. Therefore, it is important to unite behind the cause of democracy, as we cannot take freedoms it provides for granted. For this, it's utmost important to clearly demonstrate that we protect one another, fight for our values, and support our like-minded friends. Alliances are what democracies do best. Authoritarian regimes have never been effective in cultivating equal alliances. Cooperation with others for them has been need-based as opposed to value-based. The democratic world does it better. It is our strength. Now it is time to use that strength so that freedom and security will be guaranteed for Ukrainians and all democratic nations. If we fail in this, democracy will decline and darkest times lie ahead of us. Only in alliance can we remain strong enough to fight the challenges put in our way by aggressive autocratic actors. Dear colleagues, democracy is resilient, but it requires an unwavering commitment and support. The toolbox of our adversaries has changed. We must find ways to effectively fight against the changed nature of anti-democratic actors. As mentioned already, this year, billions of people will head to the polls to decide on who they elect as the leaders. We have observed the manipulations of invasion space during election periods. By manipulating the voters, one can influence public opinion and the outcome of elections at an unprecedented scale. With the rise of large social media platforms, there are new avenues to circulate propaganda and spread misinformation. Malicious actors have exploited the algorithms of social media platforms to amplify divisive content, spread conspiracy theories targeting specific demographics, and undermine trust in democratic institutions. Fake accounts and automated bots can artificially inflate the reach and impact of certain narratives, making it difficult for users to separate fact from fiction. This erosion of trust in the information ecosystem undermines the integrity of democratic process. It is especially worrying when these campaigns are launched by foreign actors. Addressing the complex interplay between technology, politics, and information warfare requires a collaboration between governments, tech companies, civil society organizations, and academic researchers. Only through collective action can we hope to safeguard the integrity of the electoral process and preserve the health of democratic societies in the digital age. Estonia uses many avenues to remedy these problems. First, we provide proper education regarding the threats in the online world, starting from the kindergarten. Secondly, we fight the disinformation through initiatives and coalitions with other like-minded actors. The Media Freedom Coalition and the Freedom Online Coalition are examples, to name just a few. I would like to emphasize that technology has no ill intentions. It is people. Technology can work for our advantage and provide tools to guard against misinformation. It can be used to strengthen democracies, enhance civic engagement, to amplify voices of marginalized communities, and increase transparency. Honored audience, democracy must not be a privilege reserved for a select few, but a right inherent to our humanity, and we must continue fighting for this right by creating trust in democracy and its power to tackle the challenges the world is facing. In a world where democracies are under attack, democratic nations must reaffirm our commitment to protecting democracy by supporting each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have the President of the Gambia.
Your Excellency, Yeol, President of the Republic of Korea, Excellencies, Head of State and Government, Excellencies, Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Excellencies, Heads of Institutional Organizations, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I thank President Yeol for inviting me to participate in this important summit. The objectives of the summit occur perfectly with our resolve to promote a strong spirit of interdependence anchored on shared values. This approach offers our countries an even pathway to address relevant challenges. Democracy, the theme of the summit, provides a solid basis to build and establish the effective value systems we have committed ourselves for our progress and prosperity. Thus, the focus on democracy gives us the opportunity to redirect our commitment to promoting effective participatory governance. For us in the Gambia, democratic governance is a valuable means of creating sustainable peace, security, and development. As a result, my government is committed to preserving our democratic gains following the return of democratic governance to the country in 2016. Excellencies, recent political trends and challenges make it necessary for democratic societies to constantly create platforms to promote shared values. Such platforms should be driven by a strong determination to jointly address developments of common interests. Sensitive to this and being responsive to the aspirations of our people, the Gambia government allows for suitable platforms to fulfill our obligations. Excellencies, the continual transformation of the information technology landscape and the socio-economic trends that unfold have implications for the legitimacy of democratic governance. Spreading malicious content, for example, to incite sentiments against democratically elected governments and the credibility of state institutions is a global reality. To offset this, my government has expanded the regulatory space for easy access to credible information, and we accommodate dissenting voices and devise legitimate political participation. Unfortunately, in Africa, we now have to confront a troubling occurrence thought to have faded away. The rise in unconstitutional change of government is a major concern again. This makes the narrative on democratic governance exceedingly significant. As a member of the Peace and Security Council of the African Union, the Gambia will not relent in finding ways of curbing social political threats to peace and stability. Relatedly, therefore, it is essential that the positive impact of intercivilizational dialogue and migration features in our discourse. Excellencies, the Gambia's development and democratic progress are inseparable. Accordingly, besides successfully holding credible national elections, a conducive environment exists that supports the pillars to sustain democratic governance. They include a free press. Taking this agenda further, a national dialogue was successfully held recently. It provided a broad-based forum to examine our governance status and propose recommendations. The process has been institutionalized as an annual event, and we will decentralize it nationwide. This initiative is to foster popular participation in governance matters and the implementation of process of the Gambia Recovery Focused National Development Plan 2023-2027. We welcome partnerships in this endeavor. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Now we will hear from the President of Finland.
Thank you very much, President Yoon, for the invitation. It's a great privilege to be here. I'm looking at my experienced colleagues, and I feel a little bit like I'm the new kid on the block. I was elected President of Finland and entered office only 2.5 weeks ago. Now, some of you might have seen that Finland was ranked as the happiest country in the world for the 7th year running. I would, of course, like to see a clear correlation between my election and the level of happiness in Finland, but unfortunately, that would be misinformation and fake news, because the empirical evidence for our happiness was gathered much before the elections. And to be honest, I think the main reason why we are that is that we are a vibrant democracy, ranking #1 in the Freedom Index. I'm also very proud of the way in which our elections here in Finland were conducted. The reason for that is I felt that they were fair, free, and very respectful. I mean, the President of Finland is basically in charge together with the government on foreign policy, and because we live next to an aggressive neighbor in the form of Russia, for us, foreign policy is existential, and that's why a lot of people are respectful in the debate. Now, I wanted to make two comments and one suggestion today, because, of course, our topic is democracy, technology, election, and mis and disinformation. My first point is about digital democracy versus digital dictatorship. I'm sure many of us were rather idealistic with the onslaught of technological development, especially in the post-Cold War era. We felt that after the Soviet Union collapsed and the Cold War ended, we would see a world which would see democracies mushrooming, left, right, and center. And to a certain extent, in the beginning, it was like that. We also felt that technology could be used for the good. Even social media, remember in the beginning, Facebook and Twitter, they were seen very much as the instruments for getting people mobilized, whether it was the Arab Spring or otherwise. But I think the cold reality is that technology can also be used for bad. It can be used for surveillance. It can be used for dictatorships. We saw that, especially during COVID. We see that it can be used as an instrument of control. And that's why I think it's very important that we in democracies learn how to use technology in the right way for the benefit of us all and for freedom. Now, my second point is quite simple, and that is to say that I think in democracy we have a problem. And the best way in which I've seen it explained is with a behavior psychologist, Daniel Kahneman, who wrote a book called Thinking Slow and Thinking Fast. In that, he has a system 1 brain and system 2 brain. So system 1 is basically very quick, reactive, and emotional, where system 2 is contemplating, slow, reflective, and compromise seeking. And my argument is that democracy was actually created for system 2. The founding fathers in the United States and those who wrote the democratic constitutions that we hadn't prepared us for a world where disinformation, misinformation, and fake news can be spread so quickly and can quickly go out of control. So my argument is that we have to adapt to this new world, because if we do not have a basic understanding of facts and information, we cannot have democratic discourse. And we see that challenge in a lot of our democracies today. And here, to finish off, is my humble recommendation. Summits of democracy, I think, are great. I learned and listened to many of our colleagues today. But I think it would be useful for us to get a set of recommendations which we could look at on how to work on the interconnection between democracy and technology. So basically a report or a to-do list where we look at the problems that technology gives us in form of disinformation, misinformation, and the challenges, and then what kind of solutions we could have. Because to be honest, I think democracy is still the best way and the best form of governance, as long as it is free, equal, and supports justice. It's been great listening to all of my colleagues today, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. In closing, we will now turn back to the President of the Republic of Korea. Dear Excellencies, I would like to express my appreciation to all of you for sharing your valuable thoughts on how to create better democracy for future generations under the theme of technology, election, and disinformation and misinformation. During the session, we had broad discussions on the impact of emerging technologies on our election processes and democracy, and we had discussions on ways to cooperate to respond to them. Through today's heated discussions, I was able to reaffirm our shared desire for a future where freedoms and human rights are respected and where peace and prosperity abound. I'm also convinced that if democracies work together in solidarity and cooperation in the fields of law, institutions, and science and technology, we can overcome new challenges of democracy, such as disinformation and fake news. I hope that we will continue to pool our wisdom together, to use AI and technologies as a lever to promote democracy and progress and prevent them from threatening our democracy, and to ensure that our efforts bear fruit. The Republic of Korea will continue to work closely with the international community, and we will actively support relevant activities by the private sector. I look forward to in-depth discussions on democracy in the following sessions as well. Thank you very much for your valuable participation and contribution in session 2. Thank you. We would like to express our gratitude to the leaders of each country for attending the session. With that, we conclude session 2. We will take a short break, and then after hearing interventions from the civil society and activists, we will begin session 3.
Let us listen to the interventions by civic society.
Your Excellencies, Transparency International commends the Republic of Korea for hosting the 3rd Summit for Democracy, dedicated to democracy for future generations. It is our lived experience that corruption undermines democracy, sustainable development, and the rule of law. If we fail to tackle corruption with vigor today, future generations will not enjoy democracy tomorrow. As we have learned in recent years, boosting integrity and combating corruption call for an understanding of new technologies, since corruption opportunities can be both multiplied and reduced through technology. A key pillar of our work is strengthening the oversight of money in politics, including our work with institutions like election management bodies, financial intelligence units, and law enforcement to strengthen their capacity to detect cases of corruption or breaches of political integrity. In this area, one impactful tool we've successfully promoted is open data platforms on lobbying activities, political finance, and asset declarations of public officials. the Clear Accounts tool built by Transparency International Colombia to facilitate financial reporting of election candidates is regularly used by the authorities to record and control political finance information, and inspired other chapters to develop similar tools which can strengthen political finance accountability. Protection of public resources is another central aspect of our work. Here, we've recorded successes in the use of red flagging tools to detect public procurement fraud and in the use of blockchain-based land registries to prevent corruption in land transactions. Another key area of our work is tackling the misuse of anonymous companies to undermine the integrity of government processes and to launder corruption proceeds. We are calling on states to implement beneficial ownership registers accessible to the widest range of stakeholders through the use of new technologies. Access of civil society and the media is crucial, given their watchdog roles in preventing and exposing corruption schemes. We are also working to support and defend those watchdog roles in the face of shrinking civic space around the world. In the digital age, it is crucial that new technologies are not weaponized by states or private actors to restrict the fundamental freedoms that underpin both democracy and anti-corruption efforts. This may occur, for example, through unjustified surveillance, misinformation, or denial of internet services. We applaud you for coming together in support of democracy. Having actively participated in the Summit for Democracy's anti-corruption cohort, we urge you to consider its recommendations on international cooperation for anti-corruption that were submitted to the Second Summit for Democracy. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. We wish you much success in your deliberations. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Blair Glenfalls. I'm the co-CEO of Accountability Lab and co-chair of the Open Government Partnership this year with the government of Kenya. OGP is a global platform that brings together reformers inside and outside government, dedicated to transforming how governments serve their citizens. I'd like to begin by thanking our Korean hosts for a wonderful summit. While I'm unable to be there in person, everything I've seen and heard online indicates that real progress is being made. And now this progress is more critical than ever. Corruption continued to be one of the greatest threats to our democracies. It erodes public trust in government institutions, it undermines confidence in the rule of law, and it allowed the concentration of power in the hands of a few. Since 2011, OGP member governments, in collaboration with civil society, have co-created over 5,000 commitments to enhance government transparency and accountability. And over 1,000 of these have focused specifically on anti-corruption, including, for example, the establishment of beneficial ownership registers and enhanced transparency in public procurement processes. Evidence from the first 12 years of OGP shows that when civil society is involved in designing and implementing anti-corruption commitments, these commitments are more ambitious, they're better implemented, and they produce more tangible outcomes. And we've seen this all around the world through OGP. For example, last year in Nigeria, civil society and government came together to launch a beneficial ownership register, the first on the continent, which will save billions of dollars in illicit financial flows. And in Ukraine, collaboration among civil society, the private sector, and the government has reduced corruption in procurement contracts, saving money, creating trust, and leveling the playing field. Anti-corruption efforts have been bolstered through the Summit for Democracy process, which has provided a platform for governments to make commitments to counter corruption. At the first summit, more than 40 governments made at least 125 commitments to counter corruption. And the establishment of the S4D cohorts enabled governments and civil society to work together to drive progress towards these commitments. But there were important gaps that we need to recognize. Many of these S4D commitments were vague. For example, about a fifth lacked reference to specific measurable activities. Few of these commitments were meaningfully co-created with civil society. And only a few countries reported progress on their S4D commitments during the second summit. And many of these statements lacked verifiable evidence. So looking ahead, I think we need to leverage OGP processes and others like it to address many of these areas and make progress together. OGP is important because it allows for collaboration between government and civil society, which is really at the heart of the process. There are also minimum standards that all OGP members must adhere to in the development of commitments, which increases specificity and measurability. And there's a built-in independent accountability mechanism that enables greater monitoring and learning. And I therefore call on and encourage all stakeholders within S4D3 to build on the momentum achieved so far and apply lessons learned from previous summits. We need to scale up the model of partnership demonstrated by the democracy cohorts. We need to leverage the OGP and other platforms to embed S4D commitments so that reforms are openly co-created with civil society. And governments need to allocate the necessary resources to ensure successful implementation of initiatives committed to the previous and this edition of the Summit for Democracy. Thank you for everything you're doing to fight corruption. And know that through OGP and the Summit for Democracy and beyond, civil society will continue to collaborate where we can to ensure more transparent, accountable, and effective governance for everyone. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Zheng Hua, the AI Research Head at Naval. It's my great honor to share my opinions on AI and democracy at this summit. Despite my limited knowledge on politics as an AI expert, I would like to introduce the significant changes in democratic environment by generative AI. Generative AI like ChatGPT is significantly different from previous AI technologies. In particular, generative AIs are not only useful for AI experts, but also easily accessible to anyone without any AI knowledge for many applications in daily life and work. We refer to this as the democratization of AI, which parallels the way the internet has reduced information asymmetry. The democratization of AI means that more people can express their opinions through higher quality content with the help of AI. However, the emergence of any technology comes with its pros and cons. For generative AI, this includes the easier creation of fake contents, potentially flooding democracy with distorted and visual disinformation. As generative AI technology advances, too much reliance on AI over humans is also a critical risk. To prevent these side effects, the first AI Safety Summit was held in the UK last November, and a second summit will take place in Korea this May. While AI safety and responsibility is crucial for the advancement of democracy, we must not ignore the benefits of generative AI, such as productivity innovations as well. So, designing regulatory policies should be very careful. Diversity and inclusion is a fundamental value in democracy. AI sovereignty is a key value for enhancing cultural, regional, and societal diversity in the new AI era. Governments, corporations, and civic groups worldwide should aim to achieve sovereign AI within their respective cultural regions and collaborate as genuine partners rather than engaging in hegemonic practices. To further democratic development in the new AI era, I would like to emphasize 2 points. One is the governments should enhance AI literacy so that all citizens, in particular, young generation can use AI effectively, safely, and responsibly in terms of AI accessibility. The other is innovations in public sectors with generative AI. Generative AI can remarkably bring productivity improvement to public workforces and enhance the satisfaction of citizens. To achieve this, last year, the Korean government established the Presidential Committee of Digital Platform Government, DPG. The Korea DPG Committee successfully supported more than 70 pilot public projects using Korean sovereign LLM, collaborating with Korean generative AI companies. Our successful applications and lessons learned of generative AI to public sectors might be a shape of future public services. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much to the civic society for your interventions. We will start session 3 shortly. Let us commence Session 3. Session 3 will cover governance partnership with Global South. We will now listen to the opening remarks by the chair of this session, the President of Kenya.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency Yoon Yeol, President of the Republic of Korea. Your Excellency Mette, Frederiksen, Prime Minister of Denmark. Excellencies, heads of state and government, leaders of delegation in attendance, ladies and gentlemen. We all understand without any uncertainty, that each of us is confronting a complicated combination of rapidly evolving challenges in an increasingly interconnected and interdependent global environment. The abuse of emerging technologies to drive transnational crime, bringing together illegal markets that facilitate money laundering, terrorism, and illicit trafficking, along with disinformation, fake news, and manipulation of voter behavior and election outcomes, has escalated the threat of harmful behavior to a point where trust in institutions of democracy is under assault from false promises of populism and tyranny. As a consequence, our capacity to provide public goods, drive growth and sustainable development, combat poverty and inequality is actively undermined on a continuous basis. The challenge is for us to proactively anticipate effective democratic governance in a high-tech era and consider the possible and desirable modalities by which we may guarantee greater peace, freedom, democracy, and prosperity in a brave new world. The pursuit of democracy must not deceive us into accepting all means, including undemocratic ones, to justify the end. Neither should our failure to manage complexity and thrive in freedom provide an excuse to substitute tyranny for democracy. We must be ready to harness the power of collective action, support strategic partnerships, and effective collaboration within communities, economic blocs, levels of governance, public and private institutions, states, and regions. This in turn calls for effective multilateralism underpinned by a robust, equitable, inclusive, democratic, and responsive international political and economic institutional framework. To fight poverty and inequality, foster progress and prosperity, support climate action, and combat crime and insecurity, we must affirm our shared commitment to undertake necessary reforms and catch up with and overtake our runaway problems. Our discussions must therefore emphasize the imperative for political will, accompanied by an immense sense of urgency to meet the challenges of our historic moment. The theme of this session invites us to reflect deeply on the ways and means by which we can align our aspirations, harmonize our strategic visions, and policy agenda to enhance coherence from the grassroots to the global level. We must also make our partnerships more effective in promoting climate action, governing technology to enhance human well-being, global peace and security, expand freedom, deepen democracy, and position multilateralism once more as a beacon of hope for all humanity in the quest to overcome complex challenges and usher in the future we all want for present generations and, of course, for prosperity. As we do this, it will be critical to pay attention to the paradoxes and contradictions which have robbed the Global South of opportunities to break free of various obstacles and freedom and progress. The potential of the Global South in terms of natural resources, including abundant mineral wealth and other valuable endowments, demographic capital, green energy, and market size is often eclipsed by relentless focus on its challenges as a permanent defining feature, which is greatly unfortunate. A governance partnership We, the Global South, therefore, must commit to recalibrate this focus in order to unlock a new paradigm of fresh possibilities that will bring our aspirations within the reach of every citizen in our lifetime. I thank you.
Thank you, President. Next, we will be inviting the President of the Dominican Republic.
I would like to congratulate President Yoon Yeol for hosting this third Summit for Democracy. The Republic of Korea is an outstanding example of why democratic institutions are fundamental for economic prosperity and human development. Colleagues and friends, for over a decade, democracy has been facing unprecedented challenges around the world. We have witnessed considerable erosion of the values that anchor the global liberal order. Although it has been weakened, make no mistakes, democracy still prevails. The Dominican Republic is a modest example that democratic governance is the path toward prosperity, sustainable development, and welfare. For almost 4 years, the government that I preside has guided our country through one of the most volatile periods of recent human history. Fortunately, today my country has been recognized as a success story due to its fast economic recovery. We owe this achievement to 3 principles that have guided our action: transparency, growth, and inclusion. Transparency reinforces the trust of citizens and investors and ensures greater efficiency in public investment. Economic growth is the material basis for opportunities and the well-being of the people. Inclusion, through social policies, ensures a more just society, in which everyone participates in the fruits of collective work and identify with democratic institutions. To promote transparency, we appointed an independent attorney general responsible of prosecuting crimes regardless of party status or affiliation. We supported reforms in the national police, including the training of agents with a 2-year curriculum to accredit them as professional technicians. Additionally, key bills were submitted and converted into law to combat corruption and organized crime, such as the asset forfeiture law and the law on administration and custody of seized and confiscated assets. Since taking office almost 4 years ago, there has been a 24% improvement in the corruption control index, a 15% improvement in the legitimacy of the state, and a 9% improvement in judicial independence. According to the latest Chapultepec Index, we top the list in press freedom and freedom of expression in the Americas. The Dominican economy ranks as the 7th economy in Latin America and the Caribbean. Our gross domestic product, GDP, has significantly increased from 78,923 billion in 2020 to 120,629 billion in 2023, equivalent to an average annual growth rate of 6.43%. Per capita income rose by 30%, reaching 11,156 per capita in 2023. Although most of the world's economies suffered the ravage of COVID-19, the Dominican Republic managed to reduce monetary poverty from 20.8% in 2019 to 23% in 2023, reflecting an improvement in general economic conditions and achieving notable progress in terms of income convergence. Similarly, during my administration, we have achieved nearly universal health insurance coverage through our national plan. Dear colleagues, we call on all participants to strengthen international leadership committed to the rule of law, human rights, and democracy. I am convinced that only through the democratic processes we will be able to achieve sustainable development that our peoples so strongly desire. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. Next, due to the issue of the internet and Croatia, we are not connected. President of Ukraine.
Thanks so much. Dear colleagues, dear democratic community, greetings to all of you. There is no point to describe how fragile the global situation is. Everyone understands the real situation. The key pillars of the modern rules-based world are weakened, if not destroyed. The world now bets more on force rather than the rules. But force and rules are not mutually exclusive. It's not either this or that. Without the force punishing the violation of the rules aren't effective. And without the rules limiting the force, it goes mad, and it is what happened with Russia. The world needs a balance between force and rules. And this is what Ukraine proposes. This is the essential core of our peace formula. Dear colleagues, Ukraine doesn't divide the world into large and small or into those who deserve more or less attention. We reject the colonialist view on the world that divides the nations between so-called great powers or geopolitical poles. Every nation matters. And now, aiming for the just end of the evil Russian war against our nation, we want to give certainty to every nation that its security will be unbreakable. It will become possible once we end this Russia's war against Ukraine, not on the terms of the aggressor or on the terms imposed on us, but on the terms of the nation that was attacked. It will be fair. Justice must become the new global rule, supported by the global unity with sufficient force. Is it possible without the global South? Definitely no. Now we are preparing the inaugural Global Peace Summit in Switzerland, and I invite all of you to join in. All nations of the world who respect the international rules-based order. Your voice matters. Together, we have to make the force that has gone mad come back to the rules and make the rules work again to shield the world order of fragility. It is vital for Europe, the Middle East, Africa, the Indo-Pacific region, and all other regions of the world. Once it works for Ukraine and against the present aggressor, it will work for all and against any other aggressor. Since the beginning of this war, Russia tried to make hell for us. It has destroyed all aspects of security. Step by step, we are restoring the security for our people and for all our partners. The best example is food security. It has fundamental meaning for every part of the world. When Russia had blocked our ports and began to destroy our agricultural infrastructure, our determination and global cooperation gave enormous results. We have restored the stability of the global food market, lifted the Russian blockade of some of our ports, and renewed supplies of agricultural production. Dozens of millions of tons of Ukrainian food have already been delivered to Africa, Asia, and Europe. Our humanitarian food program, Grain from Ukraine, is also working and has delivered thousands of tons of grain and wheat to Yemen, Somalia, Nigeria, Sudan, Ethiopia, and I'm grateful to all contributing donor countries. Now, together with the UN Global Food Program, we are planning new routes for the grain from Ukraine to tackle famine in Gaza and Malawi and the Democratic Republic of the Congo and other nations. In a few days, a new cargo from Ukraine will arrive in Sudan. We have proven that we can restore food security. And I invite all of you to join these and other points of our peace formula. I believe that peace can be solid, but for it to happen, countries in the world have to be the co-authors of solid reliability. Thank you for your attention. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, President. Next, we have the President of Peru.
Thank you very much. It is an honor to address you on behalf of the government of Peru to reaffirm our firm commitment to defend democracy, freedom, and the fundamental values that sustain fair and prosperous societies. Peru has participated in the Summit for Democracy since its first edition in 2021, and its presence at this third meeting reasserts the commitment we share with all the countries gathered here. When I stepped into office in the Republic as the first female president in the history of Peru to occupy this noble position, I offered to strengthen democracy, summon the broadest unity, reactivate the economy, ensure citizen security, and improve the quality of life of my connationals. This has been the spirit guiding how I have been leading our country, promoting dialogue, respect, and cooperation among the powers of the state and the different levels of government, in order to implement and prioritize public policies, investments, and quality services in favor of Peruvians, especially the most vulnerable sectors. In support of this national effort, international cooperation continues to play a key role in strengthening our capacities, improving the functioning of public institutions, and consolidating democratic governance, with a view to efficiently addressing the needs of the Peruvian population. In a world marked by the diversity of opinions and visions, democracy offers us a space for dialogue, mutual respect, and the search for consensus that will lead us down the road to development and peace. For this reason, its defense cannot be postponed. Preservation of democratic stability implies combating those phenomena that threaten it, scourges that by nature require global cooperation. My country draws on the experiences, good practices, and recommendations of different international actors, states, international organizations, governmental, technical cooperation and development agencies, and civil society organizations, and aligned with its firm commitment to strengthen a multilateralism that will allow to efficiently face complex global challenges, Peru continues fostering and supporting initiatives aimed at strengthening cooperation for a better democratic governance, promoting equality, engagement, pluralism, and sustainable development. Before you all, I ratify that Peru will continue fostering important initiatives in this environment in regional and hemispheric fora such as the Andean Community, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, and the Organization of American States. At OAS, for example, we fostered, together with other member states, a process of reflection in order to strengthen and enrich contribution from the Inter-American Democratic Charter that my country promoted in 2001. Likewise, at the Andean Community, we promoted adopting a resolutive action plan that includes a series of joint actions to fight against organized transnational crime, drug dealing, and illegal mining, border security, and migratory cooperation. We are living in a world that is constantly changing, marked by global crises and challenges, before which we need to stay firm, defending democracy as the system that provides us with the necessary tools to face future challenges. Peru works to build an integrated, prosperous, and caring world where principles and relationships bringing development opportunities should prevail. Only through cooperation and shared commitment we will be able to move forward towards a sustainable, equitable, and prosperous future for all of us. Only in democracy our populations will be able to develop in freedom, equality, and justice, and our countries will be able to live and cooperate to reach an inclusive and sustainable development. Peru is and will still continue to be a reliable partner for the international system, mainly at the Global South, solid and firm in its commitment towards defense of democracy, human rights, international cooperations based on mutual respect and solidarity. In unity, we may forge a lasting peace and sustainable development that we aspire to. United and in cooperation, democracy shall express its transformative power in benefit of our societies. Thank you very much.
We will go on to the Prime Minister of Greece.
Well, esteemed colleagues, dear friends, it's an honor and a privilege to be afforded the opportunity to address you today in what is the third Summit for Democracy. And I'm especially glad that this summit has been organized by the Republic of Korea, a country that serves as a model of progress and prosperity in the broader region, upholding our universal values, promoting peace and stability, and defending democracy. This year's Summit for Democracy could not be more important, given that in 2024, almost half of the population of the planet, close to 4 billion people across 60 or more countries, will go to the polls. Democracy is more widespread than ever, and that can only be a positive thing. At the same time, it faces significant challenges. Challenges that mean that for those of us who continue to believe in democracy as a political system that represents the best of all alternatives, our focus, I believe, must be on three critical priorities. First of all, unity against aggression. I profoundly believe that democracies have a duty to unite and consolidate their forces against aggressive state behavior, any behavior that violates international and humanitarian law. The war of aggression, as we heard from President Zelensky, against Ukraine has been such an example of unity in our response. The same values should apply everywhere. Civilians must be protected everywhere in the world. And I understand that countries belonging to the Global South may see the war in Ukraine as a European war, but it is much more than a regional war. It is an open challenge to international stability, to international law, to the international rules-based system that the Global South has supported as well. The catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza requires urgent action. It is the obligation of democracies to live up to that fundamental duty. Targeting civilians and causing children to die in armed conflict is never acceptable in a world of democratic values. Second, democratic states must regain the full trust of their citizens. It is our responsibility as democratic leaders to demonstrate that democracy is indeed the only system that can deliver the values that people actually want: security, prosperity, freedom, respect, and justice. Democracy, after all, is the only system that has the mechanism of accountability to guarantee the protection of those values. And only about being honest about that challenge, and of course always realistic in what we promise, only by delivering on our policy agenda can we offer tangible results for our citizens that will eventually strengthen our democracies. This brings me to the third priority: regulation of technology. Innovation has given humanity the tools to change the world for the better. Without regulation in the wrong hands, those tools can also disrupt and even destroy. Technological advances, especially in artificial intelligence, are already beginning to bring major changes in the way our economies and our societies function. If we are not careful, we risk as democrats missing the adaptation necessary to prevent the misuse of artificial intelligence. Deceptive AI, deepfakes, may disrupt the very fabric of our reality, with grave potential consequences for the health of democracy everywhere. Not only could it undermine transparency and accountability, but weaken social cohesion, collective values, and the fundamental trust that is so necessary to bind our societies together. Smart regulation that does not stifle innovation is the key. We must regulate technological innovation in the same responsible way that we regulate, for example, medicine and food. In the European Union, we have already taken that leap with the establishment of the first ever legal framework on artificial intelligence, the AI Act. I hope others will follow that lead because, much like climate change, the issue transcends borders and affects us all. Dear friends, there has hardly been an era in our history when international cooperation has been more imperative than now. It is time for all of us, North and South, East and West, to engage in genuine cooperation with the goal of mutual benefit. Division today is not about geographical distinction. It's about the peaceful versus the belligerent. It's about those who understand the value of international law versus those who wish to prevail through the embrace of violence and chaos. It is about those who believe in the preservation of human life and those who believe in nothing but their own ill-considered self-interest. There is a natural coalition of states that fall on the right side of these lines of division. And I believe that, after all, we are a majority, and our future lies in that coalition. Our future lies in working together for the benefit of all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Next, we will be inviting the Prime Minister of Croatia.
Thank you very much, distinguished Chair, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to address you at this third Summit for Democracy, which continues to serve as a unique platform to promote our shared values. And I thank our South Korean friends for hosting it this year. Croatia is attached to the democratic values. Despite growing global challenges, we must continue to stand united as partners and send a clear message of reaffirming the resilience of our democracies. The world continues to face simultaneous and unprecedented global crises. The development of the global economy was first stalled by the COVID-19 pandemic, then by brutal Russian aggression against Ukraine, and finally by the unprecedented acceleration of negative consequences of the climate change. What we need today, more than ever, is a common approach to forge reliable partnerships and alliances in a global context, upholding the rules-based global order and international law. Extreme and repeated droughts, which worsen from year to year, and in particular in the Maghreb, which is currently hard hit, threaten the stability of our societies and are a growing challenge for Europe and Africa. It is clear that climate change knows no borders and that the only possible response is multilateral, because any national approach condemns us to suffer the worst consequences by depriving us of the best ways to deal with it. However, as we have already seen around 15 years ago, nothing is more threatening to political stability in this region, and therefore to democracy, than the looming food insecurity, due in particular to droughts, but also to the fall in grain exports due to the Russian aggression against Ukraine. This, however, requires that we act together as an international community, and that we do so within the framework of an international order based on law, cooperation, and solidarity, which are more threatened than ever. For this, it is essential to reaffirm multilateralism, to make it more effective, and above all, more resistant to blatant attempts to undermine it, as Russia is openly doing today. Here I stress also the reform of multilateral system, not replacing, diminishing, or watering down the international rules-based system and its institutions. Regardless of the current challenges, Croatia is fully committed to effective and more essential multilateralism within the United Nations at its core. The time to act is now. We are looking forward to the United Nations Summit of the Future in New York this September and the outcome document Pact for the Future. This document will hopefully be our clear compass for the way ahead. This includes implementation of global commitments such as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adapting global governance, institutions to current realities, and tackling new areas such as digitalization and artificial intelligence. Dear colleagues, eradicating poverty, fighting discrimination and inequalities, and leaving no one behind must be at the center of our international partnerships. As a country that ranks 12th in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, Croatia believes that we need to do more globally, and there is a direct link between sustainable development and the strengthening of democracy. The Global Gateway, launched in December 21, is the EU's and Croatia's effective contribution to this goal and the means to revitalize global partnerships. As a country on the crossroads of Central Europe and the Mediterranean, and a traditionally seafaring nation, Croatia's exchange with all corners of the world was constant for centuries. As a European nation with a colonial past, our communication with countries across the globe is devoid of any historical burdens. For a genuine and durable partnership, I stress the importance of true, vibrant, and inclusive mutual dialogue on all topics of common interest. We are dedicated to meaningful changes to global governance with the aim of addressing new and emerging challenges. At the same time, we stand ready to listen to our partners' concerns. We are also ready to share Croatia's transformation experience. 30 years ago, just like Ukraine for 2 years now, we were the victim of military aggression with the occupation of a quarter of our country and our territory, and we too received humanitarian aid for the reception of hundreds of thousands of displaced people. Today, having liberated and rebuilt our country, and by becoming a member of NATO and the European Union, our experienced soldiers participate in many international peacekeeping missions, and Croatia, and its in turn, provides aid, including military aid to Ukraine, but also in the field of mine clearance and the investigation of war crimes. We do this with all the more solidarity because we are convinced that European democracy and security are being defended today in the Ukrainian trenches. We are already helping in concrete ways with focused and impactful projects that should duly address the specific needs of each of our partners while contributing towards their social and economic well-being. For instance, in Ethiopia and Kenya, we are focused on providing girls with access to high-quality education and digital skills development, thereby enhancing their employability. In Tanzania and Zambia, Croatia is intensifying cooperation with local civil society organizations. At the same time, we provided 5 million euros to the Inter-American Development Bank's Explore mechanism for improvement of the education system in Latin America and the Caribbean. Dear friends, these projects are a concrete embodiment of our wish to promote sustainable development worldwide in partnership and cooperation. It is also our investment in democracy, as it continues to be challenged by internal and external actors and forces. As we continue to face global challenges, we remain committed as ever to our joint task of preserving and promoting democracy for the benefit of today's and future generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Next, we will go to the President of Ecuador.
Good morning, everyone. We meet today to talk about artificial intelligence, technology, and democracy. Some time ago, these were three concepts that did not go together. Now we live in a society of rapid changes marked by the pace imposed by technology. In recent years, social interaction and the way we communicate have changed rapidly. The massive use of cell phones, the internet, social networks, and artificial intelligence is hugely transforming our daily lives, offering us great opportunities for progress and well-being. But this also poses significant challenges in terms of security. Cybercrime, cyberbullying, and the spread of false information are problems that have a strong impact on society and put the very pillars of democracy at risk. These rapid changes in technology also mean increasing threats to democracies. Ecuador has recently faced enormous challenges to our peace, posed by transnational organized crime, terrorism, and just pure evil. I am happy to share with you that the Ecuadorian people have united to face the forces that want to undermine our democratic system by supporting a national referendum that will take place on April 21st. We're confident that the outcome of this process will provide new legal tools to strengthen our democracy. We're also committed to facing the challenges with determination, and to do so, we have developed the Computer Emergency Response Team as part of the Telecommunications Regulation and Control Agency. This center is responsible for the prevention and management of information security incidents by monitoring and generating security warnings about malicious campaigns reported in Ecuador. This problem requires articulated work, and that is why CERT works at a national and international level with public and private sector institutions, as well as with other response teams against computer security incidents. While building this new Ecuador, we firmly believe in the importance of promoting a global culture of digital security. Digital literacy is the way to citizen empowerment and the identification of misinformation. My government recognizes and values international cooperation to fight crimes that do not respect borders. We must work together to obtain solid responses that consolidate our democratic aspirations and allow us to protect our citizens. Collaboration between strong and resilient democracies is essential to build a more just, prosperous, and secure world, which is why we must promote transparency, effective regulation, and cooperation between governments, companies, and civil society to identify digital threats. Looking ahead is essential to continue exchanging ideas and proposals that allow us to build a safer and more ethical future. We must safeguard cyberspace from criminals and terrorists who seek to commit crimes or destabilize states and societies. For this reason, Ecuador supports the initiative proposed by the UN Secretary General regarding the importance of agreeing on a global framework that regulates and reinforces the supervision mechanisms for the use of database technology, including AI, and not allowing, of course, this to become a tool to attack people's freedom of expression. Taking into consideration the importance of trust, transparency, and accountability, it is desirable that progress and innovation in technologies, especially AI, be aligned with the UNESCO recommendations on the ethics of artificial intelligence. The world needs defenders of democracy, and Ecuador is committed to leading these efforts. I'm sure that the exchange of ideas and proposals expressed in this third summit of democracy will allow us to face the multiple challenges that our time demands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. Next, we will go to the President of Guatemala.
Esteemed colleagues, let me begin by thanking President Yoon and the government of the Republic of Korea to inviting us to the current summit for democracy. And let me say that it is an honor for our country to participate for the first time in this very important gathering of our global democratic community. It is the first time that we have been invited because for almost 2 decades, Guatemala had a regime that was characterized by a corrupt cooptation of state institutions with a democratic facade. But this fact was recognized internationally to the point that we were never invited to the Summit of True Democracies. We are glad to be with you today, and we want to share with you our reflections coming from our experience as a country that is coming out from the ashes of state corruption into regaining democratic institutions, because only democratic institutions can provide the promise of freedom, of equality, of justice for all that we are all committed to. If the history of civilization could be portrayed as a 24-hour day, we would understand that most of our history has been a history of exploitation, of different ways of domination that meant that the few by force ruled over most of the population, and that democracy actually has been invented only 2 minutes ago at 5 minutes ago, 11:55. Democracy is new in the civilization, in human civilization, but is the promise of the possibility of freeing human civilization from the chains of authoritarianism, abuse, violation of human rights that we have seen in history. During the 20th century, we saw the process of implantation of democracy happening against the background of different threats and challenges to democracy coming from ideological origin, from left and right. We have to recognize today that there is another very important threat to democracy emerging without any ideological content, and this is the phenomenon of systemic corruption in society. We have to understand that corruption is not just a byproduct of bad governance, it means exclusively the illicit use of state resources. We have to recognize that corruption can become a systemic problem that reaches into every corner of institutional and social life of a country, and that it can reach to the point in which within the facade of democracy, you can witness political parties becoming organized just as a means to reach control of public funds in order to engage in corruption, graft, and other forms. And it is a slope, as we have seen, that begins by ensuring corruption, follows by ensuring impunity to those that commit corruption, and at the end goes to persecuting those that fight against corruption in society. It's not just a white-collar crime problem. Corruption is a political problem, and it's a fundamental threat to democratic life all over the world. We see this happening in many countries. We have to understand that this is not just a national challenge, but it's an international challenge insofar as we believe in democratic as a political system that ensures freedom, equality, and liberty for the population. Corrupt cooptation of government goes up to the point that it penetrates institutions and justice and turns institutions of justice as a means to persecute those that are fighting corruption. We have seen this in my country. In 2023, through the elections, we won a resounding, we gained a vote of confidence resoundingly by the population by promising to fight corruption and begin to recuperate institutions of government so that they can begin to work and deliver the health services, the education services, the welfare, the development that they were meant to ensure, and that was being sequestered by corruption. It was a long process in which citizen resistance to the attempts to overturn the electoral result prevailed, thanks to a committed citizen resistance that took to the streets and led the fight for democracy, and to the international support that we had from the different countries. That is why we have clearly understood corruption as a political threat to democracy. And this is why we believe that democratic nations need to recognize this problem and to organize to confront corruption as a critical threat to peace, to justice, and to democracy, not just as a problem that needs to be understood as a byproduct of bad governance or a problem of white-collar crime. Citizens in each of our countries, in each of our democratic countries, need to mobilize to protect democratic institutions as they did in my country. Democratic authorities need to understand that it's just suicidal to tolerate corruption in any form, because corruption is a phenomenon that creeps into the different spaces of government until the moment in which they can co-opt and control state institutions. Internationally, as the Global South, but in general and through multilateral institutions, we need to recognize this threat and establish the mechanisms that enable us to collaborate with each other so that we present a common front at the international level to support countries that are fighting against democracy, but also to understand against corruption, but also to understand that this corruption has internal, national, but also international dimensions that require our collaboration at every level, regionally and internationally. Guatemala has now embarked in a process of regaining control of its democratic institutions. Executive power is firmly in the hands of those who believe that there is no democratic future without fighting corruption, and we are in the process of reverting the cooptation of corruption that still prevails in some of the other branches of the state. But we believe that it's not only a challenge for us, that it is a challenge for many other countries around the world. And recognizing the fact that we were supported by many friends in the international community in every part of the world, we are willing to make our contribution to help every other country in the world who is fighting frontally to defend democratic institutions against this new scourge of democracy. If we succeed, we will ensure that the next 24 hours of human civilization will not be 24 hours of domination and dominance by any other means, but will be 24 hours, a new century and many centuries and millenniums of freedom, equality, and justice for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. We will now go to the President of Kenya for his closing remarks.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I commend you all for your great contribution and take note of the progress we all have made ensuring working democracies and good governance for a vibrant society. This is an affirmation that we are ready and willing to jointly move forward by supporting the establishment of democratic systems and processes aimed at cultivating an all-inclusive governance framework, crucial for overcoming barriers to effective democracy, particularly in the Global South. I call for a robust global nurture a democratic governance that can provide enduring solutions to the socioeconomic challenges faced by many countries in the Global South. And to record here that next month, on the 29th of April, as part of expanding democracy in our institutions, especially the international financial institutions, Kenya, together with the World Bank, will be hosting the next round of international development assistance replenishment program, number 21, here in Nairobi, to work with our development partners, with all democracies across the globe, in ensuring that countries in the Global South, majority of whom are low-income countries, have access to affordable, accessible, and concessional development financing to support our democratic institutions, democratic countries, and countries largely in the Global South. As we all recognize, functional democratic institutions and systems have the capacity to instill confidence and gain the trust of our populations, especially the young people, enabling them not only to participate, but also to actively support democratic processes geared towards building sustainable and resilient democracies capable of delivering for the future of all our generations. Again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, President. Thank you very much to the leaders for your participation in Session 3. This brings us to the end of Session 3. Shortly, we will begin Session 4, the last session of this Summit for Democracy.
We will now commence the final session, Session 4. This session will feature messages on democracy for future generations, hearing from various leaders. First, remarks from the President of the European Commission.
President Yoon, Presidents and Prime Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. This summit was created 3 years ago to demonstrate the power of democracies around the globe. Our systems are different, but there is something we all share. In a democracy, the power belongs to the people. They set the direction of travel, and they can confirm or change it every time they are called to the ballot box. Elections are the cornerstone of democracy. And this is why freedom fighters like Alexei Navalny gave their life to make elections free, fair, and truly competitive. Today, we honor their legacy, and we continue their fight. Let me thank all countries and civil society organizations that have joined forces with us in the democracy cohorts. I would like to congratulate, in particular, Costa Rica, Ghana, and Nepal for our cooperation to strengthen youth participation, and Ireland for our work on citizens' participation. But as we work to open our democratic processes to greater participation, we must also protect them. Our elections face some rising and daunting threats. I am thinking first and foremost about the interference of foreign actors, but also about the impact of new technologies like artificial intelligence, which could be used to destabilize electoral campaigns. In this global year of elections, it is more important than ever that we address these challenges. And let me focus on what Europe is doing. First, to fight disinformation, and second, to increase transparency. The ultimate goal of disinformation is to influence our elections and to erode trust in our institutions. So how are we addressing this? With the Digital Services Act, Europe was first to define clear responsibilities on online platforms, to tackle the spread of harmful content and protect civic discourse. And now our AI Act has become the world's first comprehensive artificial intelligence law, with clear provisions to prevent the use of AI for influencing voters, because campaigning should be based on facts, not on deepfakes. My second point is citizens deserve to know where the information that they get comes from and who pays for it. They deserve to know the truth. And this is why we have put forward new legislation on the transparency of political advertising as part of a broader defense of democracy package. If foreign actors are secretly paying for lobbying campaigns to influence our democratic processes, their activities will be exposed. As billions of people head to the polls, we must not let autocracies attack our democracies from within. So let us join forces again and show the power and the vitality of our democracies. Thank you very much.
Now we have the Prime Minister of the Netherlands.
In 1978, the well-known Dutch poet Lucebert wrote that anything of value is defenseless. I'm often reminded of those words when the subject of democracy comes up. Because although here together we are all convinced of democracy's value, we know that not everyone agrees, not by a long way. Around the world, democracy is under greater pressure than ever. Not only are we seeing a decline in the number of democratic countries, we are also seeing the emergence of more and more new ways of undermining democracy. Take disinformation, which is spread in a flash online. The use of AI to create deepfakes, for example, or efforts to influence elections. Just a few years ago, we couldn't even have imagined these activities. But unfortunately, today, they pose a very real threat. This means we not only need to recognize these developments, we also have to stay one step ahead of them. And this year, that is especially important with a record number of people going to the polls in 2024. There's no time to lose. And so I'd like to thank the Republic of Korea as a global pivotal state for the active role it has taken on and for hosting this year's summit. Last year, the Netherlands and Canada launched the Global Declaration on Information Integrity Online. And many countries have now signed up to this initiative. In a world that's choking on disinformation and misinformation, the Global Declaration's positive agenda is like oxygen, giving democracy a welcome breath of fresh air. It doesn't impose rules that restrict the freedom of expression, as we see in so many autocratic countries. Instead, it opens the way for reliable, diverse information that can help clear the fog of disinformation. But this won't just happen by itself once the declaration is signed. That is when the real work begins. So I urge everyone who hasn't yet done so, please sign the declaration and work with us to foster resilient democracies. Another way we are trying to achieve this is in our role as chair of the Freedom Online Coalition. We are building on the solid foundation laid by our predecessor, the United States. But we can't do it alone. We need all parties, both within the coalition and beyond, to help achieve our common goal, resilient democracies. Because anything of value should not be defenseless, but defended.
We will now hear from the Prime Minister of India.
Excellencies, Namaskar. I thank President Yoon Yeol for continuing this initiative. Summit for Democracy has emerged as an important platform where democracies share experiences and learn from each other. Excellencies, in a few weeks from now, the world will witness the largest festival of democracy in India. With around 1 billion voters expected to vote, this will be the largest electoral exercise in the history of mankind. The people of India will once again affirm their faith in democracy. India has an ancient and unbroken culture of democracy. It has been the lifeblood of Indian civilization. Consensus building, open dialogue, and free discussion have resonated throughout India's history. That is why my fellow citizens consider India to be the mother of democracy. Excellencies, over the last decade, India has moved forward with the mantra of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, Sabka Prayas. That is, collective efforts for inclusive growth. Reaching out to all sections of society, particularly the poor, women, youth, and farmers has been our top priority in the true spirit of inclusivity. We have transitioned to a performance-based governance where shortages, corruption, and discrimination have been replaced by transparency, accountability, and opportunity. In these efforts, technology has played a crucial role as a great enabler. India's rapid progress in digital public infrastructure have revolutionized public service delivery and enhanced financial inclusion. Riding on the power of youth and technology, India has rapidly developed into the world's third largest startup ecosystem. Our 1.4 million elected women representatives at the grassroots level are our agents of change for women-led development. Excellencies, today, India is not only fulfilling the aspirations of its 1.4 billion people, but it also providing hope to the world that democracy delivers and democracy empowers. When the Indian Parliament passed a law to ensure minimum 1/3 representation for women legislators, it gave hope to women across the democratic world. When India lifted 250 million people out of poverty in the last 10 years, it reinforced global faith in democracy as an agent of positive change. When India delivered COVID medicines and vaccines to more than 150 countries, it reflected the healing power of democracy. When India successfully landed Chandrayaan on the moon, it was not just a proud moment for India, it was a triumph of democracy as well. When India amplified the voice of the Global South during its G20 presidency, it showed the importance of consultative decision-making in international politics. Now, as India is on track to become the world's third largest economy, it gives hope to millions of people around the world for a brighter future. As India resolved to become a developed nation by 2047, it shows that democracy can aspire, inspire, and achieve. Excellencies, in the era of turmoil and transitions, democracy faces many challenges. This requires us to work together. Democratic countries should lead the efforts in making international systems and institutions more inclusive, democratized, participative, and fair. Only through such shared efforts will we be able to fulfill the aspiration of our people. And we will also lay the foundation of a secure, stable, and prosperous future for the generations to come. India stands ready to share its experience with all fellow democracies in this pursuit. Thank you.
Next up is the Prime Minister of Germany.
Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to send you greetings from Germany on the occasion of the Third Summit for Democracy. I want to commend President Yoon for hosting the gathering and the discussions this time. This year's issue, digitalization and democracy, is indeed highly topical. Digitalization, especially when accompanied by the use of AI, offers huge opportunities. It boosts communication and the handling of so many aspects of our lives, from production to bureaucracy, in a way that can greatly benefit humanity. At the same time, some side effects of digitalization and the use of AI entail risks and threats to democracies that have to be addressed and controlled. A huge challenge that we have already talked about are cyber threats and disinformation, which are increasingly directed at democracies, particularly ahead of elections. With the EU's new AI Act, we intend to ensure that we leverage the enormous potential of AI while also taking its risks into account. At the same time, Germany welcomes and contributes to the work of the UN. We establish a global digital compact to find a common understanding and jointly address challenges relating to our digital future. The abuse and proliferation of spyware poses another serious threat to our democratic institutions and human rights. Therefore, I'm pleased to announce that Germany will join the joint statement on efforts to counter the proliferation of and misuse of commercial spyware initiated by the US. We are also working to defend the rights of activists, dissidents, and journalists worldwide by co-chairing the Media Freedom Coalition together with Estonia. The MFC, a partnership of 50 countries that advocates for media freedom, strongly promotes collaboration between governments, civil society, legal experts, and others. These are just some examples, and I'm sure there are many more in your discussions in Seoul. Let's keep up our engagement and our efforts to tackle these challenges jointly. Let's ensure that we don't fail to address what would undercut our freedom, our democracies, and our strength. Germany will certainly do so. Thank you.
Next is the Prime Minister of Italy.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks to President Yoon and President Biden for the invitation to this third edition of the Summit for Democracy. Democracy is one of the founding pillars of European and Western political thought. Yet, from ancient Greece to the present day, European and Western history has also been a perpetual ongoing struggle in defense of democratic values. A struggle often stemming from one condition. When one people has lived in a democracy for a long time, it is led to believe that democracy is something to be taken for granted and not a valuable asset to be defended against pitfalls and worth fighting for. This is what we are experiencing today as well, with instability at international level and pitfalls running through our democratic systems. Pitfalls arising from different factors, many of which based on ideological visions. One of them holds that people are not mature enough to take big decisions, and that therefore democracy can only be understood as such an oligarchy, the governing of an elite. Another of these visions was devised by Roger Scruton, one of Europe's greatest philosophers, and is referred to as oikophobia, namely an aversion to one's own home environment. Unfortunately, often we are the first to no longer believe in ourselves, and we are the first to deny what we are. And this has devastating effects, because how can we think that future generations will believe as we do in democracy if schools and universities teach underestimating our civilization, which in spite of 1,000 difficulties and complex moments has founded its identity on the values of freedom, equality, and democracy. Only if we return to believing in ourselves, we can give new strength to our democracies. Only if we return to building our culture instead of wiping it out, can we get our young people excited again and make them the protagonists of the future. And this is what I think is most important today, to defend our democracies.
Now we have the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
This year, more people than ever before will head to the polls to make their voices heard and express their hope in a better future. It is a moment to celebrate our sacred democratic freedoms, but it is also a moment to defend them, because the threats to democracy are growing. In Russia, Belarus, Iran, and too many countries, free voices are silenced beneath the monologue of the tyrant. Opposition leaders and activists are killed or imprisoned. Journalists are locked up. Sham elections are used not to satisfy people's democratic choice, but to deny it. And technology is providing new tools for the enemies of democracy to wield. That's why this third Summit for Democracy is so important. I want to thank President Yoon for his leadership and for our growing collaboration, including on the forthcoming AI Safety Summit. The Republic of Korea shows just how transformational the journey to democracy can be. And we must all recommit ourselves to this cause. That's why we're so steadfast in supporting Ukraine against Russia's assault on its sovereignty and democracy. It's why we're bringing 50 nations together in the Media Freedom Coalition, creating the Democracy Action Partnership, together with Indonesia, championing women and girls' freedoms through our international development work, and increasing our funding of the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, which works in 30 countries around the world. We're also taking action at home through our Defending Democracy Task Force, bringing forward new measures to protect elected representatives from intimidation and raising our defences against foreign interference and disinformation through our National Security Act. Democracy is only as strong as our will to defend it. So in this year of elections, let's show that our will is stronger than ever. Thank you.
Now the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
It is my absolute pleasure to address leaders at the Summit for Democracy in Seoul this evening, and I extend my warm greetings to President Yoon and to the leaders participating virtually. New Zealand has been committed to democracy since our first parliament was established in 1854, and we've had 54 general elections, and we're in fact the first country where women won the right to vote back in 1893. Democratic values and freedoms are absolutely central to our identity as a nation. They underpin our support for equality, for human rights and inclusive government, both at home and also abroad. And in today's troubled international environment, we remain committed to advancing these values and working with those who share them to provide for the dignity, the security and the shared prosperity of future generations and to deepen our relationships. We're very proud to do our bit to promote free and fair elections in the Pacific, as well as support for the public service and the justice sectors in our region. New Zealand supports Pacific efforts to address corruption under the Pacific Islands Forum Te Niwa Vision, and we are equally committed to realising child and youth potential at home and overseas. As we look ahead to democracy for future generations, we want all people to be treated fairly, to feel safe and to feel valued. Our multicultural society in New Zealand is a source of tremendous pride for all of us. We also want to protect the natural world and deliver on the goals of the Paris Agreement through our 2050 net carbon zero goal. And we want to uphold and to advance the rules-based system for the benefit of all countries and to promote inclusive governance and respect for human rights of all countries and their citizens. To achieve this, we need to work together to reinforce the rules and the norms that treat all states and all individuals equally and fairly. New Zealand is going to continue, therefore, to work with partners who know us, who value us and trust us. And I would like to thank the Republic of Korea for hosting this important summit and to reaffirm New Zealand's commitment to democracy and to working with all of you to advance our common interests. Thank you.
Now we have the President of Switzerland.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank the Republic of Korea for convening the third Summit for Democracy, and I commend the United States and President Joe Biden for their initiative in establishing this series of events. This gathering provides a timely opportunity to share knowledge and experiences on democracy and to unite our efforts in strengthening democratic resilience. What will the world of tomorrow look like? How much trust will future generations have in their governments? Will they be able to participate in political decision-making and freely express themselves? Will they be treated equally before the law? Will the governments be responsive to the needs of their citizens? These questions demand our attention. It is more critical than ever to strengthen democracy and rebuild trust in democratic processes. Democracy, freedom and peace are core Swiss values and define our political system, which is founded on power sharing and compromise. In our own history, democracy was a powerful way to overcome political, cultural and religious divisions. We are therefore convinced of the value of democracy. We are committed to promoting it within Switzerland and beyond. We have diligently monitored the progress on the commitments made at last year's summit, and I am pleased to highlight some of the progress we have achieved. First, in 2023, Switzerland established a Swiss national human rights institution tasked with monitoring the respect for human rights within our country. Checks and balances are key for democracies to thrive. Second, we are developing a third national action plan for the implementation of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights to further strengthen these principles. Third, in our efforts to promote democratic resilience beyond our borders, our new foreign policy strategy places a strong emphasis on this objective, and we are currently developing guidelines to strategically assist both emerging and backsliding democracies. Ladies and gentlemen, let us join forces and ensure that our collective endeavors are united, as we firmly believe that democracy fosters peace, stability, and prosperity among nations. Democracy delivers. Thank you.
We sincerely thank the leaders from various countries for their valuable insights on democracy for future generations. With this, we conclude the last session, session 4. We will proceed with the interventions by civil society and activists, and then we will have the closing ceremony.
We will now listen to the interventions by civil society.
Hello everyone, and my name is Frederiksen from Zimbabwe, and I believe that young people play a pivotal role in shaping the nation's future. This is why I think it is imperative that we strive for a more inclusive and democratic society. One fundamental element in advancing this idea is education. Education is the cornerstone of progress. It empowers individuals, it fosters critical thinking, and it cultivates informed citizens. However, in Zimbabwe, we can't begin to discuss about education without discussing about the gender disparities that exist within the country. Despite the progress we have made so far, Zimbabwe is still embedded with traditional patriarchal values that have presented obstacles for young women. These values include early child marriages, limited access to quality education, and degrading stereotypes. All this hinder young women to fully participate in democratic processes. So this is a call for all African governments to challenge these stereotypes, to encourage young girls to pursue STEM, to pursue leadership roles, and to pursue political careers. We should also encourage young boys to embrace equality and good citizenship. When we educate young women, we strengthen democracy, and when we educate young boys, we build bridges across generations. Thank you.
Hello, Namaste. This is me, Jivan Acharya from Nepal, and I represent Blind Youth Association Nepal. I am a visually impaired person. If we talk about the existing impediments or challenges faced by young people with disabilities for the participation in politics or civic space, we face discrimination in the form of restriction, exclusion, and distinction. Even though Article 29 of United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities provides the right to participate in political process and public affair, including the right to accessible, easy, and understandable polling process, electoral process, the persons with disabilities are facing major 4 kinds of barriers, which is restricting their full participation in the political and decision-making level. There is diversity among the disabilities, and each kind of disabilities have their unique challenges and unique requirements, but we are facing 4 kinds of barriers. The first is physical and infrastructural barrier. Still, the offices of political parties, election management bodies, and other public spaces are not reachable by every kinds of persons with disabilities. Still, many of the persons with disabilities are not able to independently go to the polling stations and cast their votes. For example, the persons with wheelchair users. And the election management bodies also do not provide the offices of the voter registration and civic literacy program reachable or accessible for everyone. The second is the information and communication related barrier. The reports, statutes, and manifestos of the political parties are not readable by all, including by the persons with intellectual disabilities and persons with visual impairments. The election management bodies do not make their websites, their mobile applications user-friendly for the persons with disabilities, and the meetings, deliberations, statements are not made in sign language interpretation and closed caption provision. The third is institutional barrier. Still, many of the countries have the derogatory electoral laws which prohibit to cast the votes to the persons with intellectual disabilities and contest in the election on the ground of so-called mental unsoundness, and the election management bodies also do not make the disaggregated data. The fourth is the attitudinal barrier. It is related to the social perception. The political parties, actors, and agents are reluctant to accept that persons with disabilities can also contribute in the political process, political movements, equally as others, remaining in the forefront. The society still do not believe that persons with disabilities can lead, and significantly youth with disabilities face further marginalization because the mainstream youth movement, mainstream disability movement do not address their concerns and their issues. So we sincerely request Your Excellencies, the head of the states, to seriously work for the fullest compliance of Article 29 of UNCRPD, Article 21 of UDHR, and Article 25 of ICCPR for the effective and full participation of persons with disabilities, including young people, into the political process, political parties, and political structures, including in the civic space. We seriously request for the mainstreaming persons with disabilities by ensuring their representation and inclusion in each of the state mechanism and decision-making level. Thank you.
More than 50% of the global population is young. So why aren't we leading the democracy? The lack of civic education and spaces for participation limit the impact of youth. In Alma Civica, we believe that the many possible commitments built in a collective process not only empowers young people, but also drives the whole community towards common good. Understanding that particular efforts are important, but not enough is the key to solve this. We need each other's ideas and strengths. We need to be a team. That's why, as a platform for collaboration and action, Alma Civica is committed to educating citizens to democracy. Conquista Joven offers civic education through research, observatory, academy, and public policy lab. And we don't only connect young people with each other, we also connect them with authorities. Alma Civica believes that young people are the future, but also empowers them to lead democracy today.
My name is Nerima Wako Ojiwa. I'm the Executive Director of Siasa Place. Siasa means politics, and we are a youth organization that focuses on civic tech based here in Nairobi, Kenya. When it comes to misinformation, disinformation, especially with young people, it's really super important to understand that young people are having access to devices way sooner in life. So that means by the time someone is 10 years old, they might even have their own personal smart device, and they are on a platform somewhere. They have access to celebrities, the information that they share, to individuals with influence that we're not quite sure the information that they're sharing is factual. This is all happening while mainstream media is on the decline. And mainstream media, typically, most of them, not all of them, share factual information. So it's a scary world where a teenager has to decipher what's real and what's fake. That basically means in the future, we're going to have to start training kids how to decipher what's false, how to know, how to authenticate, how to verify, and to also stop spreading misinformation. And this is going to be a huge challenge, especially in our continent. Countries like Kenya, the average age is 19 years old. And when we look at politicians themselves, they have some of the largest following online. And political leaders, a lot of times, they are the worst when it comes to sharing information that's not factual, all because they're trying to push for a particular political agenda. So, big tech companies, civil society, parents, and even the teenagers themselves are going to have to learn about fact-checking, factual information, and the organizations that do that.
Thank you very much for your interventions. We will proceed to the closing ceremony. We will listen to the closing remarks by President Yoon Yeol of Korea.
제3차 민주주의 정상회의를 성공적으로 마치게 되어 기쁘게 생각합니다. 함께해 주신 참여국 정상과 대표 여러분, 그리고 시민사회와 민간 분야 대표들께도 감사 인사를 드립니다. 오늘 회의를 공동 주재해 주신 케냐의 윌리엄 루토 대통령님과 덴마크의 메테 프레데릭센 총리님께도 특별한 감사의 말씀을 전합니다. 여러분, 민주주의는 세계의 안보와 번영의 기틀을 마련하기 위한 필수 조건입니다. 지난 3차례 정상회의는 이에 대한 우리의 확고한 믿음을 재확인하는 자리가 되었습니다. 보편적 가치를 공유하는 국가들의 정상들과 세계 각지의 시민사회, 민간, 국제기구, 학계 인사들이 한데 모여 민주주의를 발전시켜 나아가기 위한 지혜를 모았습니다. 물론 3번의 정상회의 개최로 세계 민주주의를 위한 우리의 열망이 모두 충족되었다고 말하기는 이를 것입니다. 세계 도처에서는 여전히 권위주의와 반지성주의가 고개를 들고 민주주의 가치와 정신을 끊임없이 위협하고 있습니다. 이러한 도전에 맞서는 우리의 사명과 책임이 그 어느 때보다 막중합니다. 청년과 어린이, 그리고 우리 아이들의 미래가 지금 우리의 노력에 달려 있습니다. 대한민국은 세계 모든 민주주의 국가들과 함께 이번 정상회의의 성과를 다져나가면서 세계 민주주의를 한 단계 성숙시키기 위한 노력을 계속해 나갈 것입니다. 폐회와 함께 근본 제3차 정상회의의 의장 요약문이 발표될 예정입니다. 지난 4일간의 치열한 토론 그리고 우리가 나눈 경험과 통찰을 생생히 기록하였습니다. 제3차 정상회의는 오늘로 막을 내리지만 민주주의를 위한 우리의 위대한 여정은 계속될 것입니다. 다시 한번 참석해 주신 정상들과 모든 분들께 감사의 말씀을 드립니다.
With this, we are concluding the third Summit for Democracy. Once again, we sincerely thank everyone who participated in the Leaders' Plenary for Democracy for Future Generations. Thank you.